I've had many leading experts on this show, including Matthew Walker, and they've all said the same thing about sleep. They've said it's the biggest positive investment you can make in your own performance. You can have the best strategy in the world, but if you're consistently tired, poor decision-making will follow and eventually cause other things to fail in your life. So if you're looking to optimize your recovery, you should start looking at what you're sleeping on. Our sponsor, Helix, makes high-quality mattresses tailored to your body. It doesn't matter if you run hot, sleep on your side, or need something firm. Helix has a mattress for you. And I asked them recently to send one to a member of my team, and Juan received it. And we travel a lot, so when he's home, quality sleep really matters. And he told me he's getting the best sleep of his life. And the data backs it up, with 82% of people in a Helix study saying they saw an increase in their deep sleep. And with a 120-night trial, you've got 4 months to prove it to yourself. You can get 27% off at helixsleep.com/diary. That's helixsleep.com/diary.
I've gone from 200 followers on Instagram to 1 million in 9 weeks. I just had tasted the failure so much that I wanted that success. One of the biggest things was going back to work. I went back to A&E. I am working in a position where I'm the resus department of a very busy hospital in A&E in London. The mortality rate with COVID is around 1%. I am seeing that percentage of people who are the sickest who are in the hospital. I could hear in his voice instantly that something really bad had happened. And I just said straight away, who's died? It was weird. The whole world, closed in. And I can't explain it. It sounds really dramatic, but it was almost a spotlight came onto me in that moment. And I was like, no, it can't be. I just couldn't believe it. That's the thing about suicide or, about when these things happen. It can happen out of nowhere. And for everyone around that person, it is that guilt that you carry, I think, forever. Ask yourself honestly, when is the last time you genuinely sat down and thought about what you want to do in life? What actually is your purpose? What makes you happy? And if you haven't done it in the last year or so, do it. We had a phone call again and she said, it's back. I'm like, what do you mean? I said, the cancer's back. What do you say to someone who is dying in the next couple of weeks? What can you say? A lot of it's non-verbal. You have a hug and you just share that moment, don't you? But when you walk out of that room, it's like, wow, I'm not seeing her again.
Dr. Alex George. You may know him from Love Island. You may know him as one of the most well-known A&E doctors in our country, or you may know him as a government advisor to youth mental health, appointed by Boris Johnson last year. Alex knows a whole lot about happiness, about the things that make us unhappy, and about how we should be living if you want to live a truly fulfilling life. In this conversation, you'll come to realize that we are so far away from how we should be living, and that in order to get there, we might have to redesign the entirety of the society we live in. That's a belief that I have. This conversation energized me, it inspired me, it brought tears to my eyes, it gave me absolutely everything. And again, if there's a reason why I started this podcast, it's this conversation. Without further ado, I'm Stephen Bartlett, and this is the Diary of a CEO. I hope nobody's listening, but if you are, then please keep this to yourself. Alex, I read a ton about you over the last couple of weeks, months, since you've sort of risen into the public eye. And one of the things that I really wanted to understand before, and I tend to start here with most of my guests, is I want to understand what it was from your childhood that made you the man you are today, and what those significant moments were in your view.
Wow, that's a deep question to dive straight into. Let's get in there. Well, I mean, look, I was born and brought up in West Wales. I lived on a little small holding. My parents, not farmers actually. Often people assume that there'd be a farming background. My dad, a policeman. My mum worked in the bank. And I had quite a quiet upbringing, in the countryside, two younger brothers. School life for me, I think, was up and down. I was bullied quite a lot at school, a little bit in primary school, more so in secondary school. I think as I grew up, I was naturally, I think it probably innately as well as my environment that I was in, I was introverted or became an introvert. And there's a lot of conversation about, are you born that way? Is it you molded that way? I think probably a bit of both for me. And I think, when I was at school and as I was growing up, I think my parents were a big influence on my life. I think they instilled a lot of the values that I have. My mum was a big believer in that you should, go out there and try and add value to people around you in the world, and their focus is around what you achieve in terms of that, rather than necessarily trying to be really successful, make loads of money or whatever. And I think that instilled in me that sense of I want to do good or try. I'm not sitting here thinking, I have the same. I love cars. I love all these different things as well. I'm not saying I'm, trying to be some kind of save the world person, but I had that kind of general thing that I'd like to go out there and do something good if I could. And I think when I was about 13, 14, I had a bit of an interest in science. I liked, I liked the idea of working in a career or going to a career that had, a sense of teamwork, a purpose, which might sound a bit odd as an introvert, but I still wanted to be as part of a movement, if you like, and that's where medicine kind of appealed to me. So I started kind of watching early shows of the equivalent of 24 hours in A&E back in the day, and really kind of thought, it'd be amazing to be an A&E doctor, the excitement, the adrenaline, that'd be so awesome. I love that idea of, using science and medicine to save people. And I just started working towards that goal, really. And I'd say that, again, school wasn't that easy for me for various reasons. I know now that I'm dyslexic. I didn't know that then. I didn't know it at school, didn't know it at university. I really struggled with my written work and stuff. And I was very frustrated, actually, at school a lot of the time. I also had a very short attention span. When I was in primary school, I was put into a special needs class for a long time because, I don't know. I think I had a short attention span. Maybe they were concerned about me. I don't really know why that was a concern. My mum actually went into school and said, actually, Alex is quite bright. I think he'd be fine. I went back into the normal classroom, and we kind of continued from there. In secondary school, again, struggled a bit with the written work. And actually, when I applied to med school the first time around, I did all the interviews, got my place. I actually missed out on my grades of a grade A in my chemistry by 2 marks. Which cost my place at med school, which is actually one of the most painful moments of my life, and I think really, really a defining moment. Because at the school I was in, I wasn't in a great, I don't say horrible school. It was a perfectly fine school, but I wouldn't say it was like a really, really high achieving school. It was a state school. No one, I think, had done medicine for a couple of years, a good few years potentially. Everyone was excited about this idea. We've got a student going. And there was this kind of everyone waiting for me to kind of open my results. And I was like, yeah, I've got 2 A's and a B, or 3 A's and a B. Brilliant. I'm really glad about that. But sadly, my 2 marks means that I can't go to med school. And I think that was a really defining moment for me. I was kind of my first feeling of failure in a way. And I think all of that has come together, kind of mold my attitude, I think, to life and to kind of working hard, to wanting to achieve, to kind of appreciating success when you have it.
You said you were bullied in school. What for?
I grew very tall very quickly. I was very skinny. I always had quite a bit of acne and stuff when I was younger. And I think, but mainly actually, the main reason I think I was bullied was because I was sensitive. I am sensitive as a person. And I think things would get to me probably more so than I noticed my friends or other people around me. And I think that, sadly, sensitivity attracts some, bullies at times, and when, at the moment, doing a massive campaign with Number 10 and Diana Award around bullying and tackling that. And a lot of the young people I speak to have experienced the same. Sensitivity sadly attracts that. But it's odd because now I look back and think, at the time I thought that was a real weakness, but now I see it as a real strength. And I think my sensitivity has allowed me to be a better doctor. I think my ability to have empathy on my patients. I read people very well. I understand when I'm in a team, even now, whether it's in the hospital or the team that I'm working with, all kind of from a management perspective, or whether it's people working with people at Number 10, I read people very well. I understand people, and that allows me to get the best out of people. But back then, it was a real target for bullies, I think.
Mm. And obviously, as you've spoken about at length, that sensitivity, I guess, is incredibly conducive with having positive mental health.
Yeah, I think so. I think it's about, when you're talking about being an introvert and things, and being sensitive, they're not necessarily mutually exclusive or necessarily come together. But I do think that it's about learning what you have and how to use that to use your strengths. Turn them into your strengths. I saw that as a big weakness, whereas now I see it as a great strength. And I think sometimes as you're growing up, you're unaware of what's good or bad about you physically, or, you know, in terms of your personality types. And sometimes the things that you kind of very hard on yourself about when you're younger, like being sensitive, I'm now quite glad of. Even though now, of course, it still leaves me open. I mean, you know how it is being, you know, known in the public eye, whatever. I hate that phrase, but I think it's an understood one. It obviously opens you up because you're open to criticism a lot, and especially now with the work I'm doing in the mental health space, it's tough, and there's a lot of people in the political space, people watching what's happening, who will criticize you, you know, and that is not easy, but you learn to deal with it, and you build a bit of a thicker skin as well, I think.
Have you learned to deal with it? Because, as you say, 1 point something million followers on Instagram, 1.9 million followers on Instagram, or whatever it is. That's a lot of people. Probabilistically, there's going to be a bunch of them in there that, you know, they just want to ruin your day.
You know, it's funny because of all the things I've had the full works of death threats and all this kind of stuff, particularly, you know, anti-vax and things like that in recent months and stuff. That doesn't bother me at all, funny enough. I don't mind that. And people can call me ugly, they can say look a certain way, or, you know, they can call me what they want in that sense. And it doesn't bother me too much, to be honest. I've really been able to kind of, even though that was the kind of stuff that bothered me when I was younger, I'm very resilient to that now. What I think I'm more sensitive to now is when people kind of criticize the things that I'm working on that really matter to me, particularly the stuff around the mental health space. You know, when I've been actually working in the space for a good few years before I even moved before 2018 when I was on Love Island. Even before all that, I was really, you know, actively working with the charities. I was also, you know, passionate advocate in my space in A&E. We see a huge amount of mental health. I mean, one of the big misconceptions about A&E is we just see, you know, injuries, cuts and bruises and heart attacks and things. At least 30% of our workload relates to mental health. And I think it's probably higher than that in reality. And I've really worked in that space. But obviously, you know, since I was appointed Youth Mental Health Ambassador, since sadly my brother passed away last year, which kind of led to me focusing even more, and I guess the attention on it, which led to the appointment. It's tough sometimes when people go, well, oh, you know, you got 80 million for mental health support teams at school. Why didn't you get 200? You know, you've let us down. You didn't get 200 million. It's very hard, you know, and it's when you, especially when I go, I'm naturally very optimistic and positive person. You know, when I came into the role, I was in the role and I was in it for about 2 or 3 weeks and I got 80 million quid. That's a lot of money. You know, at a time in a pandemic where the government's pretty strapped, we spent a load of money. I'm not just saying it's just me. We worked there's other people with the group and the number 10 and outside that worked on this. But I think it's fair to say I was a big steer on that happening. And then someone goes, oh, you didn't get enough. You've let us down. What you've done is terrible. You know, you shouldn't be there. Why are you in this role? Not easy. But I always go back to, and I think at the time when I came out, there's a huge, and I should say this, I've 95% amount of support. It's been unbelievable. It's always the 5% or 1% or whatever that gets you a little bit. But, you know, now I've gone back to the idea of, well, actually, what are my values? What matters to me? And I go, well, actually, I believe that I am making, you know, at least even if it's a millimetre of difference, I'm doing something positive, and that keeps me going. And that's what stops me becoming down, I guess, from the kind of hate, if you like.
Are you a confident person?
No, I don't think so. I am confident. That's a good question. No, I'm not. I don't think so. Not inherently confident. I think I would always, if you put me in a party, if we were at a swanky party in New York that you might attend before the pandemic, I'd probably be the guy in the corner quietly chatting to 1 or 2 people, you know, and just I would certainly avoid center of attention, classic kind of introvert in that sense. But even though I'm not confident, I do think I'm very resilient, and I think I'm very determined, and I think that helps me a lot. Where confidence lacks sometimes, my determination, I think, pushes through.
I mean, it kind of begs the question, and I'm sure, you know, you're probably sick of people inquiring about this apparent contradiction, which is not a confident person in your own definition of confidence. And yet when that Love Island researcher comes knocking on your Instagram when you have 200 followers and says, do you want to be on one of the biggest shows in the world? Topless.
Yeah.
Like one of the biggest shows in the country, topless. You were like, sure.
Yeah. Well, I mean, the reason that happened was, look, when I was at university, and I loved my time at university, as mostly, and we'll come and talk about a little bit about a time that wasn't so good, maybe in a little bit, but on the whole, pretty good time. But in my second year at uni, one of my very, very good friends, Freya Barlow, who was, and it's annoying because sometimes you hear, and I don't mean this in any disrespectful, but you hear people talking about someone that's passed and everyone goes, oh, they're amazing, they do this and they do this and that. But honestly, like, Freya was the most amazing person. She started like 2 charities. Even by her second year in med school, she spent her summers vaccinating kids and abroad and going to Africa and just doing like a really amazing work. And very sadly, well, I actually remember one week, it was towards the winter time. I'm trying to remember, towards the winter time, I said, Freya, you've got some bruises on your arm. I mean, are you all right? I said, oh, a bit odd. I've got a few bruises. I'm actually going to see the doctor. I think it was the next day or the day after. Anyway, a couple of days later, we had a text in the group saying we need to go for dinner tonight. I need to talk to you guys. I thought, this is odd. So we went to dinner and she sat us down and said, look, these bruises that I've had, I went to the doctor, had blood test taken, next day rushed into hospital. I've got leukemia, and she had acute myeloid leukemia, which is a very, very serious form of leukemia. And to put into context, it differs between people, but it can be a matter of short weeks from being diagnosed to passing away if you don't have treatment really quickly. So it's one of the most aggressive and nasty cancers that you can have. So it's a huge shock to all of us. And she quite literally went to dinner and the next morning straight into isolation in the hospital to have nuclear chemotherapy, basically, like really, really strong chemotherapy. She was in there for a huge length of time, many, many months. And, it was really hard to watch her, hair falling out, losing weight, swelling in her arms and feet and things like that from the chemo. And she was always so positive throughout the whole thing. Her positivity was unbelievable and how relentless she was. And even to the point where she's actually, the university said, look, take time out, clearly, we want you to recover and have time out. She said, no, I want to do my tests. I want to do my exams. She sat her exams in isolation, in an isolation cubicle in the hospital, which is just unbelievable and shows her resilience. Anyway, after a long period of time, I think it was 6 months or more, she actually had a bone marrow transplant from, I think it was someone in Germany that gave her the bone marrow. And she came out of the hospital and we were like, yes, she's getting through this. And she even ran a marathon, something silly, like a month or so, a couple of months afterwards to raise money for leukemia research, straight. We were like, just chill out a bit. No, she's like, no, I'm straight back to charity work. Fine. So then running into the next winter, we had a phone call again and she said, it's back. I'm like, what do you mean? So the cancer's back. And she was told she had a matter of weeks to live because she'd had the bone marrow transplant. It was now to the point where there was basically nothing to do. So we threw a big ball and a party to kind of celebrate her life to that point. And we all kind of said our goodbyes. I went to her house actually to say goodbye to her. And one of the things she said to me before she passed away like a week or so later, it wasn't very long. She said, Alex, you're an introvert. I think you've got a lot of talent in terms of what you do, and I'm very proud of the things you do. And I think you've got a lot of potential in your life, but you sometimes shy away. And I want you to go out there and say yes to things, put yourself out of your comfort zone. So I think it's fair to say often in life, I just keep myself in that comfort zone. Put yourself out of that comfort zone, say yes to things, live your life. I'm in a position now where I have to stop my life here. I want you to live yours. And that, I think, is a very long-winded explanation, but that is why I went on that show. Because I actually was very resistant to it the whole time. And even to now, the execs will say I'm the one person that didn't want to go on the show. But I was like, I almost felt like I don't know what I believe and what you don't believe. But I was like, what would Freya say? She said, get on that show and do it. And that's why I did it.
I can't imagine what it's like having to go and say goodbye to a friend like that.
And it's so difficult. And at that age, only 22 or 23 or something, whatever I was, it's very odd. It's very odd to have a conversation with someone. And like everyone's experienced grief at some point. But this was the only, and still is the only time I've been sat with someone knowing it was the last conversation. It's a very odd situation because what do you say to someone who is dying in the next couple of weeks and they're so young and you had all this hope about them getting better? And I remember it's almost like I go back to that moment so intensely because in that moment I was like, this is the last chance I'm going to speak to this person. I need to capture every second of this. So it's almost like hardwired into my brain. But I really appreciated what she said. And to this day, even now, I was on Sky News this morning and stuff, which is, again, miles out my comfort zone. Never, I'm becoming more used to these things now, but miles out my comfort zone. None of that stuff would happen if it wasn't for what she said to me, I don't think. I'd have just continued staying within that comfort zone, not pushing myself, and protecting myself in a way, I guess.
What did you say to her on that day?
I told her that I loved her, and that I was so glad that I knew her, and how grateful I was really that she was my friend. And, you know, what I didn't tell her, which I said to other people, was how cruel the world can be sometimes. You know, you got someone who's going to be a doctor, and we want an amazing doctor as well. You know, not just a doctor, but an amazing one. And such a kind, genuine person. Like, how cruel can it be to happen to that person? But obviously in that moment, you don't want to say that. You know, you just want to instill that feeling of love and appreciation for them. But it was hard. What can you say? A lot of it's non-verbal. You have a hug and you just share that moment, don't you? But when you walk out of that room, it's like, wow, like I'm not seeing her again. Very odd.
Very difficult.
Very, very difficult. But, you know, I'm very grateful. And I know I've taken it straight into a darker place there, but on a real positive, you know, I feel that the people around us can have such an impact on our lives, and like so much light has come from her life because of that. I continue to talk about it as much as possible, you know, and we all celebrate her and her life, and I hope that I have taken a bit of her with me to do some of the things I'm doing now, and I hope that she'd be proud of some of it.
And you were working in sort of emergency medicine before the Love Island experience began, so begs the question, how did you get into that if you weren't able to go to medical school?
Well, so basically I'd applied at the time, if we go back to when I missed my grades. And this is where I think I learned about failure, which I think is very important. I'm talking about success, but failure is incredibly important. I failed by 2 marks, obviously absolutely gutted, didn't have my grades. What made it worse was me and my friend were going to Liverpool together. He was going to go to dental school, I was going to med school, best buddies all the way through, like can't wait. And obviously like, oh mate, sorry, you enjoy yourself. Yeah, gutted. So I had to apply again. I remember sat down with my mum, and she was very upset, as you can imagine. And I said, look, mum, it's fine. And I apply again, I get the grades, I do the interviews, do the tests you've got to do for the application, it's fine, I'll get in. And I believed that I would. I was like, I'm not going to give up. I corrected a few sentences on my course that I needed to correct to get the marks back up. I reapplied again, did the interviews, I got my place. And
does it sound like a guy that lacks confidence?
I don't know. I think resilience and confidence are probably separate things. I think that was one of the first times I really faced properly in my life where I'd really failed, and I had to kind of ask myself a question: do I give up? And I was like, I am not giving up. I'm going. And I think it was like, but I think that did give me confidence. I think if we're talking about that, it's like that resilience of going. I was like, wow. When I got the place again and I went to med school, I did feel more confident about that. I might not be confident to walk topless in front of people, like when my knees were shaking and walking out on Love Island, but I was more confident myself that I was resilient. And when I went to med school, the great thing was, and I think this is why failure is so important, I knew how painful it is to nearly miss out on something that means a lot to you. Secondly, I really appreciate it when I've actually succeeded. So when I was at med school, I just appreciate it so much. I loved every moment of it. You know, I worked hard, you know, and even though I nearly missed out on going, I came out with a distinction, the top kind of 2 or 3 in the year. You know, a few people each year get distinction. So I ended up doing well, but I don't think that's because I'm particularly better than anyone at the exams or whatever. I just had tasted the failure so much that I wanted that success. And I think that has been a really good life lesson. You know, I still fail today. We all fail, right, all the time. But I know that I can pick myself up and I will always get there.
Psst. Do you want to come in and watch this podcast live from behind the scenes? If you do, all you have to do is hit the subscribe button. And now that the world has opened up, you'll be behind the scenes as many of our subscribers have been. I can't wait to meet you. That's part of what inspires you to try things outside of the sort of circumference of your comfort zone, is knowing that even if, you know, the worst possible outcome occurs, you've been here before, you survived this storm. And it worked out in the end. And I think even for me now in my life, when, you know, because our comfort zones are all subjective to our experiences in life. So I have a comfort zone too. You know what I mean? People think I've achieved a lot in like my business career, whatever. I still have a comfort zone. There's still this thing in my head that says, Steve, this is what you're capable of. Right. And so even when I step outside of mine, the thing that I'm always relying on in the hardest moments of my life is that hindsight of, you know, we've been here before, we've got through this. Yeah, and you got to have faith, even if it doesn't feel like it, even if your emotions are telling you otherwise. You've got to have faith and trust yourself.
Well, you learn every time you extend that boundary of a comfort zone. You've got a step further. I mean, what you're doing at the moments outside of your kind of come. So what are you doing that's kind of pushing? Because I think it's important to share, because people will look at you and think, oh, these guys so successful and everything, but we all are pushing that boundary, right?
Yeah. So a couple of things. The first thing is obviously Dragon's Den, which I've done podcasting before, but I control this. Yeah. And there's not 4 point something million people watching. I mean, we've got close to your time, but I control this. So, and I know how this works. This is my domain. Dragon's Den, when you're sat with 5 panelists, the one on your left's been there 20 years. The one on your right's been there 15. And there's massive cameras swinging. There's this lift door swings open and all of this. And then you're, all of the dynamics to consider, trying to learn how to play my role in this show, while also trying to analyze the business and decide whether I want to give my money to this business within a short period of time. It's a lot. That's outside my comfort zone. DJing, as you can see over there. I'm learning to DJ, and I'm going to do a show this year. That's sick. Outside my comfort zone.
Where are you doing it? I'll come through. I love that. I'll stand in the corner, at the back corner, out of the way so they don't notice me, but I'll appreciate you.
Like introvert, we'll create a little class box. This show we're doing I think it's 12 days away. There's, 1,000 people coming to the Albert Hall. It's amazing. Musical. I've written the whole thing, chosen the music, 20-person choir, etc., etc. Big show. And then I don't want to rattle on, but my last thing would be my business. So I started a company when I was 20, grew it, it's worth 300 million, very interesting journey. Now I'm going like 10 times bigger. And to play at a 10 times bigger level, where you're trying to raise 200 million from the start and grow a multi-billion-dollar company, it requires a completely different set of skills. And again, you feel in some areas like an imposter, but I don't give a fuck, because I've always felt this way. I've always felt like this. Like, I've always felt like, this sounds crazy to say. That's how I felt. Everything I've said my whole life sounded kind of crazy to me until it wasn't. Yeah. So when I say crazy things these days, again, it's that hindsight of me going, well, everything else I said sounded crazy, and it worked out. So
it's just you just learn, don't you, from your experiences, that even though it's a different uncomfortable zone that you're in, you got through your last uncomfortable zone and you came out stronger from it. And even if, and that's important to say, even if you failed at that time, you still survived it. You're still here, you're still breathing, you got up and you're going again. And that's important. That's the important point from it. And it's interesting hearing that, because I'm starting my business, Prescribed, which is a very much smaller business, the bath bombs that we're doing, self-care, which is very exciting. But that's a very uncomfortable zone for me. I mean, I have surrounded myself with a team that have experience in different areas, and I recognize that it is an area that is new to me. But even with the right people around you, it's quite scary. So, but it's exciting as well. I think that's a big thing I've learned. I've learned to enjoy that feeling of being uncomfortable. My mum has a great saying, actually, and she said this for many, many years, and I love it. Get comfortable being uncomfortable. I think that's a really great point. I mean, you never are quite. I mean, it's an imperfect statement, but it does. I kind of get that. It's like in the hospital, for example, right? It's like in the hospital. Okay, you start as a first year medical student, right? And you've never taken blood in your life. I don't know how, to get the needle into the vein, taking a blood test, right? Honestly, my hands shaking when I had to do the first blood test in a real person. I thought, no, I'm out. I can't do this. I'm not made for it. I'm an imposter. What am I doing here? Get me out of here. And then, you do it 10 times, like, oh, that's fine. And then you build up. And then the first time, when you're, say, a fifth year med student and you're doing your first CPR on a cardiac arrest patient, helping out in resus and in the A&E department, like, oh my God, this is too much. What am I doing here? You do it a few times, it's fine. And every margin you gain, you get better at something. But it always happens. I mean, even consultants say, have been doing it, been studying between study and working for 15, 20 years. And they say the first day of the consultant, they feel like their first day at med school again.
There's something really interesting there. So I want to ask you a question on that taking the blood from the veins as a junior doctor. How would you feel in terms of fulfillment? And I'm totally leading you to a place that I want to ask another question. But how would you feel in terms of fulfillment if you were a junior doctor, they said, okay, today, Alex, we're going to take blood from a vein. And then you had to do that exact same thing for 20 years. So first day, you're shitting it. Oh my God, no, shaking hands, take the blood. Second day, a little bit more comfortable. Third day, a little bit more comfortable with it. How would you feel in 20 years' time? Yeah. Doing the same thing every day.
Yeah. I think you need to, I think self-development is very important, and feeling that you're adding layers to your skill set or whatever, we're talking about medicine here, but it can be anything in life. I think that variation and variety is very important, and feeling that you're pushing, basically feeling you're pushing yourself.
Yeah.
And I think that's the idea of, because at the end of the day, the struggle of life and the challenges in life, getting over them is what gives you that sense of reward. If you don't have a struggle, if there isn't any struggle, if life was completely easy, if you woke up with 50 million quid in the bank and there are no challenges at all, you'd be very bored, actually, I think, and I enjoy, there's always a balance, because you have a balance. It's all about balance. You don't want too much struggle, because that's, or too much hardship. And if A&E was making me cry every day, then clearly I wouldn't want to be there. But yeah, I think that it's good to have that increasing mounting challenge,
And that's exactly what I was alluding to, which is that worthwhile struggle is achieved by stepping out, being uncomfortable, as your mother said. So we know that worthwhile struggle is so critically important to being fulfilled in life, as you've said. And that worthwhile struggle, like showing up that first day or then advancing, is achieved by being uncomfortable. So if we reason from there, we can say being uncomfortable is the reason why you achieve worthwhile struggle, which is the reason why you achieve fulfillment. And this is part of what I was alluding to, which is people that avoid the uncomfortable piece, which is at the very start of that chain, then don't get the worthwhile fulfillment, which comes from the challenge. But also they stay in situations which are no longer serving them, relationships, jobs. And that, again, because they're like, oh my God, uncertainty of jumping off this cliff and going into uncertainty is just, and then they have midlife crises and mental health challenges. And so that's why I'm just so passionate about.
It's the whole idea around fearing less, I think. People are often, I love psychology. I read a lot of, I've read Power of Now, The Secret, all the kind of classic ones, but I'm really into that kind of mindset theory. And a lot of people are very afraid that the next situation they might find themselves in will be more painful or difficult than their current situation. But in reality, often you find that the change you're going to experience isn't as bad as you think it is. It's the idea of the analogy of having a Ferrari on your drive, right? And you get your Ferrari and the first day you're so excited about it and you think, oh my God, I'm going to be so happy about this car, and this is going to be, so every day we're so excited about it, it's going to be incredible, I've got this massive house. But every day that you return to the baseline level of happiness. What you're experiencing is pleasure, isn't it? Not necessarily fulfillment, it's a pleasure. And that will come down. Obviously, the Ferrari, after a certain amount of time, you might love it, and I love my cars, but I'm not going to be jumping up and down every morning, every time I see the car. It's eventually going to come back to the baseline. And equally, people worry on the opposite end. Say you're really, really worried about, I don't know, changing your job, and you're really worried that you might start this new job and you'll be really bad at it and it's going to be so difficult every day and I'm just not going to be prepared or whatever. And then you start the job and the first few days can be really scary. You might feel really uncomfortable and it's really challenging, but you will come back to that baseline of it being okay. And if you look at relationships, people worry, oh, I'm in this relationship. What if I break up in this relationship and the next one isn't as good, or I'm not as happy, or regret it? I think I've really messed this up. What have I done? But actually, your fear, when they actually do it, they go, actually, it was fine. I wasn't meant to stay in that relationship. I was actually staying there from a place of fear and fearing too much, rather than going, well, actually, if you stand to reason, my current situation is far from perfect. I don't want to be in it. Why should the next situation be any worse?
I completely agree with everything you're saying. In fact, I sent one of my best friends a quote last night that I'd written, because of the situation he was in, and I think it kind of exemplifies what we're saying. I said, if you want to avoid making the same mistakes twice, make more decisions based on your past memories and less decisions based on your current emotions. And what I was trying to say there is that in the moment, when you're in that relationship or you're in that toxic job situation, you'll be suffocated and imprisoned by your own fear of uncertainty or failure, or I'll never meet someone as good as this, or whatever it is. But you've always got through it. You've been in love. Like with me, I was convinced from the age of 12 that I was going to marry Jasmine. And then at 14, I was convinced it was Helen. And then at 16, I was I've always thought that this person was the one. In the moment, I've always thought, this is it. And look at me moving on to number 7 and thinking, this is it.
You kind of hold on to your current situation, because ultimately we always go, well, actually, my current situation I'm not in pain. I've got food and water. I feel okay. It's not that terrible. What if the next situation, whatever that might be, work or otherwise, life or others, what if that is worse than my current one? We always fear the unknown. But it's like this, and I hope I'm quoting the right genius. I think it was Einstein that said that, it's the definition of insanity is repeating the same action, or it's roughly along the lines of being the same action, expecting a different outcome. If 1 + 1 is always going to be 2. So, if you're having that same outcome and frustrated with it, you have to change something in your equation to bring something different.
Amen. We were talking about failure there, and that led us on to talk about university. And you subtly said that there was a part of university which you didn't enjoy.
Yeah, I think I don't think anyone in life lives an entire life of just being happy all the time, everything's great, and having periods of being flat or sad or losing yourself. And I think my time for that up to date, I think was probably at university. I was at my 4th year, everything going great, studies going great. I was on for doing really well. And I actually was based, so I went to University in Peninsula, which is Exeter and Plymouth, but we do placements all the way around that kind of peninsula.
So Plymouth.
Yeah. And I loved my time there. But I got sent down to Truro to hospital there, and I loved the hospital, the people, everyone was fantastic. But I was kind of away from friends. I was in a place that I just felt quite isolated. And I actually suspect I'm probably just putting it on that as a place of reason. But for whatever reason, I just become quite flat, and I lost interest in my exercise, stopped exercising, my studies even. I wasn't really working as much as I should have been. Sleep went out the window. I was staying up late, getting up late, eating bad. I just lost myself entirely. I became quite unhappy, and I kept really quiet about it. I didn't tell anyone because this is terrible. I was going to be a doctor. I need to be really, really strong. How can you be a caring professional if you can't take care of yourself? So I left it a long time, probably 6-7 months of feeling pretty damn miserable. To the point where eventually I was like, I need to do something, but I was like, I can't speak to the med school because they might think this guy, we got to have to hold him back or something. He can't be a doctor. And that's not true. And actually look back and think that was, sadly, that's a big part of the stigma around mental health, but that isn't true. But at the time I felt that way. So I called, who a lot of people relate to this. What do you do in a situation of trouble? Called my mum. And I said, it was a big outpour of emotion. I was like, this is what's happening. I feel dreadful. And she said, well, look, there's a few things we're going to do. We're going to talk every single day and start speaking about the thoughts and the things you're having. Because I was beating myself up a lot and about being sensitive and weak and all this stuff. I was like, let's talk about this stuff. And secondly, let's start getting you doing the things that you know that are good for you. She was like, you've stopped doing all the anchors in your life that keep you feeling good. It's pretty wise for her. She's not a doctor, she works in the bank, but very wise woman, clearly. I'd like to think so. And she said, look, start doing those things again. So I thought, you're right. She makes sense. So I'll go for a walk every day so I get natural light and the benefits of being outside in nature. Let's start exercising again. So I created an exercise routine. I was like, I'm eating rubbish food. Let's start cooking again. I make my own food rather than just getting ready meals. And I was like, I'm not really connecting with people. So let's plan stuff. So I started making plans with my friends. And I also had an idea where I was like, well, actually, to help me feel less isolated, let's call a different friend every day. Some people I haven't spoken to for years, and just chat to them. And all these little things, all these micro changes added up within literally weeks to transforming how I felt. I got my zest to live back. I had my energy back. I was like, I'm back to that kind of type A, happy, forceful person to kind of go out and really make the most of each day. And I think I've learned so much from that. And I've learned from that throughout my time post-university. But also I've learned about that in terms of what I think people kind of don't understand about health. And, when I was working at Lewisham Hospital, I still work there now in A&E, so many people that I see, so many patients come in, and I realise that they've not been given the tools through education and school about understanding how to actually look after themselves. We taught so much at school about maths and English and history and whatever, but no one tells you about why sleep is actually so important to your productivity, your self-worth, your happiness, that sleep is not actually a state of just being sedated. You're actually in a creative space. The idea that, nutrition can actually help you feel better, not just for having a diet or whatever that people kind of see it as, the role of exercise, all these different things. I'm like, but these things actually do matter, because these things are not only keep you physically healthy, keep you mentally healthy as well. And that's where, the book Live Well came from. I wrote that book because I felt those are the things that no one taught me in school. And even at med school, we focused on anatomy, physiology, and pathology, looking at diseases and treatments. But we didn't do enough, in my opinion, about these fundamental things around sexual health, physical health, in terms of, sleep, exercise, passion and purpose. A big reason we go to school, surely, is to find what our purpose and what we want to do in life. And no one kind of gives you any tools, I don't think, to figure out what that is. I was lucky to find my kind of sense of purpose. I was kind of stumbled upon it, based on some of my interests, and I was kind of lucky. And I really felt that those kind of bits, that's why I wrote that book. I felt that is the stuff that I wish people had told me when I was younger,
So I've got a couple of points here. When you went through that phase in university, would you classify yourself as being depressed at that point?
I would look back and I was depressed. I had low energy. My mood was poor. My sleep was disturbed. I had lack of interest in my hobbies and stuff. There's plenty of kind of tick boxes for being in that category. I said I had mild depression at the time, mild to moderate depression.
And you said there that, and this is because it speaks volumes to me, what you said after, which was that what I heard was that people don't understand the full range of the causes of depression.
Yeah.
And I've sat here twice now with Johanna Hari. Do you know Johanna Hari? He wrote a book called the Lost Connections.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And I went through the years, and I've said this before, but I went through the years not believing this idea that we were just being born broken, and understanding that the only thing that's really changed in humans over the last, let's say, 20 years is the world we live in, and the way we live, right? The way that society has conditioned us to live more lonely, as you've written about in this book. And I read about, less meaningful connections, less purpose in our lives, less exercise. We're getting more stagnant over the last 50 years than ever before.
Yeah.
So one of the questions I was planning on asking you today, but you kind of answered it there, but I'm going to ask it again anyway, is what are the biggest misconceptions about maintaining good mental health or what's causing bad mental health that you have, in your opinion?
Well, I think if you look at what humans are designed to do, we're designed to be out. Well, we should be outside mostly. We will create shelters and things, but most of our day should be in natural light. We should be, going out and searching and foraging and finding our food as part of a team. So we're usually in a family or a group, a clan, to tribe to go out there and get your food. We're supposed to feel that sense of purpose within our tribe. So someone is generally a leader, the people that help, there's people with different skills, but you feel a sense of belonging to that tribe. We should be eating food that comes from the earth, that's not processed food, that we certainly wouldn't do as part of nature. We get plenty of exercise as part of our day, like foraging, hunting, doing whatever, building. You look at modern life and flip that round and go, a lot of us spend our times in boxes inside without any natural light, glued to phones, not connected with people, often feeling that we don't have our sense of purpose and not really understanding, why we feel that way. A lot of the things in modern life are pulling us away from good quality sleep, giving us bad sleep. They're putting us towards fast foods and processed foods, away from natural sources of, good quality food that fuels our body. And if you look at it all that and you think about it in that way, it makes a lot of sense why people feel quite lost. They don't know why they feel a certain way. And I think we just need to kind of step back and go, let's educate. And this is why, what the work I'm doing in the youth mental health role, I'm focused on education so much. And we've made 5 wellbeing videos for this summer as part of the summer school program, which are going to go out to all the schools in the UK. And we're looking at sleep. We're looking at exercise, we're looking at nutrition, we're looking at managing social media and what to do when you're not feeling good in yourself. And within those videos and within the toolkits we're giving, I'm hoping there's a lot of stuff in there that people go, wow, I didn't realize that about sleep and why that's important, or, why I need to get natural light, why I need to get outside. So I think so much of that stuff comes together. I'm not saying that the cause of mental illness is always related to lifestyle. That is obviously not true. There's a huge amount out there that's, to do with genetics and diseases, and you can't blame lifestyle for all disease, but I do think it's a big part of it. And if you look at what happens when you go to your doctor and say, I'm depressed, I need help, the first thing we look at is lifestyle. And we combine that with other treatments if needed, regardless of that disease. And actually, even when you're looking at severe forms of mental illness, the lifestyle factor will always remain really, really important, because without that, I don't think the treatments can do it alone. It has to be a combination thing. But this is what, there's so many people out there, not necessarily depressed, but they're just low mood of just anhedonia. They just don't feel themselves. They're just a bit lost. And I think a lot of it comes back to the things I talk about in that book.
I couldn't agree more. And because I agree so much, I've tried to figure out how one would, from their apartment here in Shoreditch, do something to help. And because it's such a fundamental issue about the way we've chosen to live our lives, illuminated glass screens to date, to order food, to move around, as you said, isolated 4 white walls. These, you can't tear that down, surely. So I reflect and go, we would literally have to rethink the way we live our entire lives, the foundations in which our lives are built, in order to solve this problem. That's genuinely what I think. To truly solve this problem, we'd have to redesign our society.
I think so. I think and even, I think as a whole, I think that's a big part of the solution. But as an individual, if you're sitting within this space, you're living in the world we're in now, right? You can't get rid of social media. It's part of our work. It's literally part of the mouthpiece of a lot of the stuff that we do, for example. You can't get rid of that. So what is the answer? It's about adapting and making sure that you are aware in your life of these principles and thinking about how you can actually adapt your life to make sure you encapsulate, you're incorporating that. For example, stuff like, I know if I don't go for a walk each day and get natural light and just feel that I'm around in nature, I get anxious. I feel a sense of just like being not at ease. So I make sure every morning I get up in the morning, first thing I do every day is go for a walk, out for a walk in nature. I move. It's great for productivity. I get great ideas sometimes when I'm walking, some bad ones as well, but generally just being out and about is brilliant for that. I make sure that at the end of each day, I again get outside and I move, but also I do my exercise at the end of the day. It signifies the end of my working day. I plan things, meaningful connections with my friends and family now more than ever. It's so easy just to chat on the phone or FaceTime. I'm like, now that we can more safely with the pandemic, make time for the people around you, see them in person, do things with them in meaningful ways. Talking about sleep, the whole sleep when you're dead idea, and a lot of, I think, you talk to obviously a lot of very successful business people, and sometimes the slightly negative side of the work, that life is not finding that balance of sleep. And I know the things I'm juggling as well, that can be difficult, but I really, really value and understand that if I don't have my 8 hours sleep and good quality sleep, I'm not going to be as productive. I won't actually be as creative, and I probably won't be as successful at the things I'm doing. So it's just making those changes, and just being aware. Once you're aware of a problem, you talked in an episode before talked about exercising between for the summer shape, right? And being a summer body, right? I'm not calling it out here, but
you before Love Island.
Exactly. No, I'm not saying that. But part of it for me, same for me as well. I went, well, why is that? Why are we doing that? Well, as soon as you're aware of the why and why we're doing something, we then, through that awareness, modify, and we realize all of a sudden we modify our behavior. It's kind of idea. If I say to you, right, focus on your breathing, it's think about your breath. All of a sudden you start controlling your breathing. You're aware of it. You're making a conscious decision around that subject. So I think just having that knowledge, have that understanding, and be aware of what it's doing to your life. Some of it you might incorporate. Some of you think, actually, I'm fine in that sense, but think about it.
That's such a good point. And, up until, so the example you gave, just for reference sake, is the reason why I was always unsuccessful in the gym is because my goal was to look good for summer. So when I looked good or summer ended, my why was gone. And it was a cycle that just repeated every single year.
I think most of us feel that. Most of us have been there and done that, haven't we?
But your point there was the thing that cured it was the self-awareness of my own cycle. And without the self-awareness and the education, which I think you've done a tremendous job in this book of educating people on, we, as it relates to the point we're making about the society we live in and how it's broken, you will literally be a puppet to the society, and the society will be your puppet master. It will tell you, the notifications on your phone will tell you when you can sleep, and it will tell you how to communicate and form meaningful connections. Use Tinder. It will orchestrate your life for you. And I think what you're saying there is, which I completely agree with, is self-awareness allows you to take back control and be intentional about these critically important areas of your health.
Yeah. And then if you want any more kind of evidence of how much it controls it, think about, if I said to someone now, right, don't have your phone in the bedroom tonight. It'd be an instant for most people. I don't speak for everyone, but a lot of people have been instant. I'm not doing that. Anxiety around the thought of not having your phone in the bedroom. It's like, why is that such a big thing? It's not a problem to have the phone outside the room. Why do you really need it? But it shows our attachment to tech and to the modern life. We don't need that phone. And actually, when I was on Love Island, the best thing about going on Love Island was the fact I didn't have a phone for nearly 9 weeks. That was the best thing about it. I literally say that. It was great being out in the sunshine. But that actually was amazing. It was like a real wow. And now I've come back, we're so attached to it again. And it's something I'm working on. I'm conscious. I need to start putting my phone out of my bedroom. I've done it a few times, but it just creeps back in. But I'm aware of it now. And then I think that's a big starting point for fixing a problem, is just knowing it's there.
Speaking of Love Island, when you came out of Love Island, I heard that you went and did some therapy.
Yeah.
Tell me about your thinking there and what inspired that.
When you look at risks for deterioration in mental health or mental illness, one of the biggest things we talk about is change and big life changes. And people sometimes think that means bad things. It means good and bad. Like, for example, you could have been given your dream job in London and you're from Leeds. Now, that's the goal, and what's happening is your dream. You've had that dream job, but it means a big life upheaval, getting a new flat, being away from family, friends. So even good things can bring problems, right? So when I came out of the show, I was like, wow, I was quite aware I've been through quite a big thing. I've gone from 200 followers on Instagram to 1 million in 9 weeks. I'm not someone from social media. I don't understand it at all. It was all completely new. The life had changed. I'm now being stopped, by everyone in the street, which is something so different for me. And I was like, I need to process this. So that's why I went to therapy. And I think it was one of the best things I've done. I kind of had to unpick what I was going through. And it was almost like it's such a big shock to the system. And it really, really helped me. And I'd say to anyone, everyone should have a therapist. I actually think, everyone needs a therapist in life. And it's one of the things that I think the Americans have really got right. I think that we could learn from is that it's so much more open, just talk about things and what you're going through. And people are very happy to say, yeah, I'm getting therapy, and it wasn't because I was particularly going through a difficult time. I just was aware I've had quite a big change. Very
self-aware of you to even want to do that. Because you, as you say, you weren't struggling tremendously in that moment, but it was almost preemptive, I guess.
Yeah. I just kind of was like, this is just, sorry to use the word, but crazy. It's like, this is a crazy thing to go through. I need to kind of process this. And it really helped me, because I went back to unpicking about like, who am I? What do I want in life? What do I want to achieve in my life? And it allowed me to kind of consider those things, as well as dealing with like, okay, what's it like, for people to recognize all this kind of stuff. And it really helped me. And going back to that kind of purpose point, I kind of had this kind of big life shift of like, what is my purpose now? Because I've wanted to be a doctor since the age of about 13. I've done all that training and passed all those exams. I'm actually pretty happy at 27 years old being a doctor. I've got a good life in what I'm doing. I enjoy it. Now I've got this whole new thing. What is my purpose? And it really helped me kind of figure that out. And one of the biggest things and the most important things that I did was going back to work. I went back to A&E after a couple of months to kind of just get back into that kind of what the sense of me was. And from doing that, actually, it gave me the purpose for everything else, and all the things that I do, and all the things like the books, the podcast, the other bits and pieces that I'm doing in my life. It all stems off that purpose. And I think I was very lucky to have that therapy. And I'm glad that I had it to help me figure out what I was going to do.
Christ, and in that moment coming out of Love Island, you have more options than ever.
But you can but more options also gives you, brings the possibilities of making a lot of mistakes. For example, and I'm not saying there's any kind of slight at all. We're all different. Everyone's different. But for me, I was not going to come out and do club appearances or, do those kind of things, because I'm an introvert. I would have hated it, as you probably realised by now. But secondly, it would have drawn away from what my purpose was and what I really wanted to achieve. So, and I'm very wise advice I received coming out of the show. Stomach is rumbling, sorry guys. So wise advice I received when I came out of the show was, say no to most things. If you're saying yes to more things, you're saying no, you're probably doing something wrong. And I had to kind of channel that. And it was a risk in it. And sometimes I could have made a ton of money going to club PAs. The most I was offered was like 10 grand to go to a club, right? Just for half an hour, 40 minutes or something. And I said no to every single one of them. And to this day, I've never, ever done one. But by doing that and channeling my energy into things that I care about and putting my time into the projects that kind of matter and give me that longevity and the direction I want to be in, that was very important. And as I say, I think a big part of figuring that all out was therapy that really helped me, I think.
What's really interesting as well is when you when you drift away from yourself, you almost don't notice it happening. Because you just take one of those club PAs and then, someone, they go, we'll get him back next week. And then they tell the club down the road and they get you down there. And then they go, well, I've got a friend that maybe he can do some, this or that, the other. And it's just this slow sort of swaying from yourself, from who you are. And this happens with a lot of people. And sometimes it happens. Yours was huge temptation in terms of like financial temptation. Yeah. Some people, it's, their mum telling them that they should be a lawyer. And they go, well, I'll do that. And then they get 10 years down the line and they've swayed so far from who they are that they've lost that sense of their purpose, they don't even know the way back. It's almost, but their new identity, their false identity has become so much part of them that they don't know how to, they've built this group of friends. That's the other thing, because then it's reinforced by the people you then associate with. You get the wrong type of people around you, and it's hard to get back, right?
I believe in that kind of, not law of attraction, but, if you move in a certain direction, you take a step in a certain direction, you will move in that direction. And the further steps you take, you move further in that direction, and you will attract people that are moving in that same direction. And that's fine if it's going in the direction you want to, but if it's not, you're going to end up in a place you don't want to be. And that's why the number one first chapter that I do talk about is that passion and purpose, the purpose idea. How do you find your purpose? And a lot of people ask that question, and I think it's that idea you've got to look at your values, your experiences, your beliefs, your interests, and find that intersection between those. What are your actual talents? Where does that all kind of lie? And I think you've always got time to change that direction. I think if you're in life and you're doing law, but you wanted to do, I don't know, you want to be an artist or whatever. Well, why, first of all? What do you need to do to get to that position? I do believe that modern life, unfortunately, does create a lot of boundaries. I think you can't do this or that. You can't change the direction. If you're in this direction, you can't go in the opposite. And I think that's such a shame, and we should change that. Look at medicine, for example. I mean, imagine the eyebrows raised when I moved in the complete opposite direction. And I don't mean this, and I hope it doesn't come across in this way, but a lot of the things I've done haven't been done before by someone that's, a junior doctor that's going through those ranks. It's a first, and certainly in this country, I think Dr. Mike has done something similar in America, but in this country, it's quite different. But I hope that people, what they'll take from that is that actually you can change. You don't have to go down a certain path. And if you're not happy with the path you're going down, what are you going to do to change it? What are your goals? Write it all down. I still do it now. Every now and then when I'm feeling a bit, I need to, think about where I'm going with things, or I just need to have a moment. I write down all my thoughts, my goals, my ideas. Sometimes I just word vomit onto paper, whatever I'm just thinking in the moment. And then I leave that piece of paper for a day or so, and I come back and I look at it. And sometimes you think, what is written down here? And I start circling stuff, and I start thinking about, how does that connect? Why did I write that? What am I thinking about when I'm looking at that? And then from that, you take away that word vomit and make a new list of what is my purpose? Number one, what is my number one purpose that I want? What is my purpose? And then, under that, put your goals. How am I going to achieve that? What are my goals? What are my aims? How am I going to put it into practice? And it's just a simple thing, actually. It's so easy. You just need a pen and a blank piece of paper. But I think everyone should do that so often. I mean, in business, they talk about the 5-year plan and all this kind of stuff. But I think just as an individual, just get out of your head sometimes, get out on paper, know what you're doing. Am I happy? Do I want to change it? Am I following? When I write down my purpose, am I actually doing that? Am I doing my purpose? But also, if I'm not, what am I doing to achieve it? Because if you're not doing anything that will get you to that purpose, then what are you doing?
There's something, what you're describing there is you're interrogating yourself. You're interrogating your thoughts, your underlying reasons why you're thinking things, maybe thinking of pursuing things. And in a world where there is this constant whispering, this external whispering, which is saying, you should be an influencer, you should be a YouTuber. People will love you more if you're a millionaire. And we're exposed to that every hour of every day, no matter where we look. This external thing telling you what your purpose is, what the best purpose is. Yeah. And we know that, as you're saying, purpose is subjective. Mine's different from yours. But the world has a very clear idea of what the best purpose is.
It's very interesting. It's a very interesting thought.
And this is why I'm such a big advocate of this interrogation. In fact, that's it's saved me in my life, because 18 years old, I want my diary. It said Range Rover, hot girlfriend, £1 million before I'm literally said £1 million before I'm 25. Range Rover Sport. Those were my goals in life. Came from a place of insecurity. Obviously, I was susceptible to that whispering, telling me what the best purpose and the way to millionaire is, the way to happiness is. But without that interrogation you've described, you will go with that voice because it's fucking loud, right? So there has to be a counter voice. And by putting it on paper, you're really attacking that external narrative, which threatens to lead you astray, right?
Yeah. And I think it's that idea, like you said, life is kind of, you've got influences within your life, like friends and family. They have common beliefs, what your mum wanted you to do or whatever, and that directs you. Then, as you say, you've got this massive it's loud and quiet, and that's the problem. It's like an undertone and a loud kind of part of it saying, do this is what should make you happy. I think that interrogation is very important. I think anyone listening to this, ask yourself honestly, when is the last time you genuinely sat down and thought about what you want to do in life? What actually is your purpose? What makes you happy? What is peace? What does peace mean to you? You know, and if you haven't done it in the last year or so, do it. Take out a piece of paper. All you need, pen and a paper. It's a very easy task. It's not a complex one. Write it down. It's amazing. It's a really enriching and motivating process. And again, the key thing is it's not like yes, I'm achieving it. It's not about that. And it's about going, well, you know, what direction am I going in? If it's not the direction I want, what am I going to do to change it? Basically.
I can't. Yeah, so important to do it often as well, because again, you're going to log in often to Instagram, and you're going to be exposed to that external voice often. So I think the counter practice has to be done often as well, which is that recentering to self, right?
And I think, absolutely. And I think when you're talking about the Instagram, the voices, the noise that you're seeing online, particularly on that note, and I try and tell everyone this: go through your feed if you haven't done it recently. Go through your followers and unfollow anyone that doesn't serve your hobbies, your interests, your beliefs, your passions. It's amazing how much we collect people that we're following that actually make us feel bad. They're giving us the wrong noises. They're making us kind of judge ourselves harshly, whether that's your body type or what they're achieving, or they just annoy you. Unfollow it. Your feed, if you're going to have this noise, have it as a noise that reflects your purpose, your passion, your hobbies, your beliefs. And I think that will, for a lot of people, make a big difference. If you're going to have the noise, have the good noise.
Oh my God. I can't explain how important that advice is. Just thinking logically, if you go into your phone at the moment, you probably see, I probably spend several hours a day on social media. That is several hours potentially polluting my brain with junk values. Yeah. Making myself feel like shit. That is mental self-harm. Yeah. And once upon a time, quite literally, once upon a time I made that decision. And so what, because people listening to this, they'll say, well, Alex, I can't unfollow this person because they are my friend or my work colleague, but you can hit the mute button.
Can mute them.
Yeah.
Mute them.
I mute 95% of people in my timeline. Genuine on my Instagram, about 95% of people are muted. And I'm exposed
now
to
everyone's going to be looking and going, hang on, I thought we were like, am I 1 in 10? Am I 1 in 10?
Do I watch your stories? There's your answer. If I'm not in your stories, then unfortunately you're muted. And it just is what it is. We've all got to protect ourselves.
I agree. No, honestly, that 100%. If you can't unfollow, mute them. Just curate your feed. Have it to be what you want to be. It's not just about the business or influence. It's about just general life. Let's be honest. Most people spend a couple of hours on your phone, so make that couple of hours either enjoyable or useful or funny. And that's the same with like TikTok and stuff. I use TikTok mostly just for a bit of fun. So I follow mostly like cats doing stupid stuff or whatever, anything that makes me laugh. So just, it goes back to the kind of interrogating, why are you using that platform? Why are you using that social media? Is it serving your purpose? And trying, genuinely, it's not easy, but try and create those boundaries. If I was going to say to anyone about boundaries around using your phone, try and protect the last and first hour of each day. The first hour is very hard because people get up in the morning, you're up, and I'm sure, looking at you like, oh God. But, and even if you can do it, to protect the first 20, 30 minutes, because the first thing people do, when you wake up in the morning, and there's a lot of scientific thoughts around this, we are a blank canvas, a blank piece of paper. We are so vulnerable actually in the morning to our day being dictated based on what we see and what influences our day. So if you pick up your phone, you see your ex-girlfriend, or you see something, or Trump has said something, or there's a new news piece that's really triggering you, you're allowing external factors to dictate the start of your day. When you're talking about being productive, creative, and hitting the day and winning at the day, that's not a good start. So if you can get up in the morning, leave the phone for the first 15 minutes. If it's an urgent message, fine. But get up, have your coffee, have your shower, do your exercise, have your walk or whatever, then open your phone. Even if you can do it for 15 minutes to start with, it makes a huge difference. And I find that benefit. Protect that morning, and the evening, give that time. Because what people don't realize often is that what we see in the last kind of hour at night dictates a lot of what goes on in our brains. So if you are watching triggering stuff on TikTok, even if it's funny stuff, that is going to influence what your brain's doing from then on. So think about what you're putting in front of your eyes before bed.
I need to stop watching all these bloody murder documentaries. I'm like addicted.
Before sleep, yeah.
I fall asleep watching a murder documentary, I'd say 90% of the time. And that's no exaggeration.
What do they say about CEOs?
Oh, I know, right? Yeah, exactly.
Fucking
hell. Something you said there is really interesting. And this could be a tough question. So you talked about the, Instagram giving unhealthy false comparisons. Love Island is the same. How do you kind of like, having been on the show,
how do I find peace with it?
Yeah.
It's interesting because there's two sides to it. I think that people watch Love Island for escapism, and a lot of people watch it and don't it doesn't go past that level of just easy watching, fun stuff that you're seeing. But then for some people, they're seeing these bodies and it is affecting their belief and their value within themselves. And that is what worries me. And I sit on the ITV board for mental health. So one of the things we're really looking at now is that we should be reflecting on, particularly reality TV, society as a whole, both in kind of diversity, in terms of backgrounds, but also body image as well, and I think that's the direction we should be moving in, very importantly. And something that I've really said before this series of Love Island, we've got to see that it reflects society as a whole. Whether they follow that advice, that's down to them, kind of thing. But my real worry is that for some people it does send out that wrong message. But it's difficult. I went on the show as myself. Pretty much the one regret I had as going on the show is I think I probably trained very much for the show. If I did it now, I'd still train, but I'd probably do it less worrying about being like ripped or whatever. But it is interesting because most people would say if they went on TV in that way, they'd want to feel comfortable. I think there's that balance of feeling comfortable in your own skin.
But why?
But not to the extent, the extreme that I went to. I was training so hard and stuff, and I was worrying about it too much. Now I'd be a bit much more like,
They'd want to feel comfortable is an interesting thing, because the reason they wouldn't feel uncomfortable is again because of what society's told us what you should look like. And I think Love Island's success is somewhat linked to the Instagram culture we live in. It feels like if Instagram was a show, it would be Love Island. Yeah,
and it's kind of what I mean by the comfort. I guess it's about where you feel that you want to be within yourself. Like at the moment, I'm probably carrying a few more pounds than I'm happy with. I know that I move better in that way. I feel more comfortable in that way, and it's just being happy within yourself, but not being influenced that for example, I'm not bothered though I have a six pack. I wouldn't feel that now me being comfortable means me having a six pack. I'm actually very happy just to be lean, to be able to move, to feel energized and stuff. And that is what comfortable would mean to me now. But at the time, because I felt like, I needed to look with the abs and everything like that, I was like very much actually out of my comfort. I was restricting my diet hugely. I was overtraining. I wasn't spending time with friends. Saying before the show, I didn't see anyone for like 20 weeks. I found out on the February, I basically went to this interview and I had no intention to kind of go on the show. It just kind of happened. And from there, I was offered the place, and actually my consultant said, do it. And I had this obviously noise of Freya in my head being like, take opportunities. I was like, all right, I'm going to go for this. I had 20 weeks between knowing I was going on and going on the show. Most people who apply the show apply in the September before, almost a year before. And in that year before, they're already in, this certain shape and look this certain way. So I felt a lot of pressure from it. And as I say, if I went back, I'd do it differently. I would do it differently. But it's easy to say with hindsight, of course. Very easy to say with hindsight.
Do you think Love Island is good for one's mental health?
Is it good? I wouldn't say that it adds to people's mental health, no. But in a way, if it's escapism that people enjoy and they watch it, I think the important thing is how people are perceiving what they're seeing. What you're seeing as a show, ultimately, it is just TV, isn't it? It's how you're perceiving it. But if you're finding that it's triggering you, don't watch. It's the same with Instagram and unfollowing accounts that are not making you feel good or that are not serving your purpose. If you find that it's triggering you and how you feel, don't watch it. I haven't watched this series. I have a lot of stuff going on. I just don't have time to watch the show. And I'm not missing out. I don't feel that I'm missing out.
My issue there is that people don't know the impact it's having. And I remember this study by Professor Tim Kessler, who studied how people's values changed from what they see on the TV. And he does a study with these kids, and when kids watch, the example is they watch some people another kid with not so good values playing with a really nice toy.
Yeah.
And they've shown the kid watching the show, the advert for the toy. They've made the kid really want the toy, and then they've given it to someone with really bad values just because they watched that advert of the toy. The kid will then, from that point onwards, choose to associate with bad values.
Yeah.
Just because of it. So the kid didn't know what was going on, right? It's a kid. It doesn't understand that its values are being swayed just by what it's seeing on the TV. But then in its life, in the study, the kid will then go and choose bad values over good values. And it's that, obviously, you know, and to be fair, like, most people aren't as, like, psychologically introspective as maybe me and you are. Yeah. So they are just...
The thing is, and I guess the point, and I completely see that side of it, and I see that, in my opinion, there's good and bad to Love Island. I'm like there's most things in life, like, for example, social media. My point is, if you got rid of Love Island tomorrow and you cancelled it, it'll be replaced by something else. It's like social media. It's out now. Like reality TV, these kind of shows are out there. So what can we do about it? First of all, let's think about what we're putting on and what we're representing on there. And second, let's educate. And I think that's why, for example, one of the wellbeing videos are on social media, and a big part of that is like dealing with what you see online, body image stuff, which actually links and extends, like you said, from Love Island. It says education is the very important point within that. People being aware, I think that is the part that we can control. Same with social media. We can't get rid of Twitter. Twitter, you know, there's some good stuff about Twitter. I think there's a lot of bad stuff about Twitter. I find it quite triggering a lot of the time. Can we get rid of it? No, it's not going anywhere. So is it about learning how to manage what's going on there and working with the social media companies to improve that space, which is what we want to try and do? Yes. Is it also educating people about how to use that tool as well? And that's the difficult thing, you know. And ideally, if we get rid of all the bad things in life, or the elements that are bad, that would be amazing. But it's some stuff out there we have to just learn to manage and learn, you know, how to deal with.
No, I think you're right. I think Love Island's definitely a consequence of a culture that is demanding that type of show. I think you're right that if you are to help erode the demand, then you have to kind of go to the root cause of
we have
society.
To change what people want, and then that will the stuff on TV is like exactly as you said, it just reflects what people are wanting in that moment, because that's what they believe they want. It's like what papers write and what the headlines are. They're just reflecting what they believe people want to see, or what they believe that people will be interested in, I guess.
And reinforcing it.
Yeah, exactly.
It's this cycle.
And reinforcing that cycle. So by changing and going and into schools and going, well, actually, why do you need to look like that to be happy? Does that actually make you happy looking like that? Is that something to aim for? And changing that, I think that is how we'll change what we see on screen.
And you worked as a doctor throughout COVID. That is, oof.
Yeah, it's odd because it was good and bad all at once, and I clearly have to justify why I'm saying there's an element of good to it. The bad part was obviously everything we saw, and I think Lewisham Hospital was one of the hardest hit hospitals. I mean, the amount of death that we saw was huge. And I saw so much death every day, young people as well as old, and I think it was a real kind of, wow, this is happening, you know, feeling as we saw everything getting so busy, the resus department being full of patients, having to make very difficult decisions about situations and patients individually, and also how to manage the hospital in terms of capacity and ventilators.
What do you mean by difficult decisions?
Well, you know, when we see a really unwell patient, so resus is the place we see the sickest patients in hospital. You've got, generally most departments will have minors, majors, and resus. Resus is the place that if you're really unwell, and if we don't do something, there's a high chance that you're going to die or have serious outcomes, right? So if you're in there, generally you're pretty unwell. And when we see a patient, even pre-COVID times, we have to make a decision about what we're going to do and where the best places for their treatment and what the ceiling of treatment is as well. You know, what I mean by that is, for example, so we're seeing a patient in resus, you know, for example, if we're seeing a patient that has loads of comorbidities, they've lots of a high burden of illness, it could be, you know, they might have diabetes, heart disease, they might have end stage kind of dementia, they might not be aware of where they are, might be very elderly, very frail. If they are very unwell and with an illness, we have to make a decision about whether actually it is kind and correct to put them in intensive care with all the invasive wires, the lines we put into central arteries, putting the tube down the airway. You know, what are we doing that for? Is that going to likely benefit that patient and lead to a good outcome? And what we want is to treat people in a way that's kind, and that we can we know that what we're doing is justified for that patient, because that patient is at the centre of that approach. So we have to always make decisions about that. If it's a young person, and it's not an age, very important to say, age is not the factor that we make that decision based upon. Being fragile and frail physically, which might be associated with age, is something we think about, but not age in itself. But if you are in your physical health, young, fit and healthy, and we think that taking you to intensive care and doing all this stuff is likely to lead to a good outcome for you, then obviously that's what we do. But there's certain decisions where, for example, in the COVID, in the pandemic, we had someone with dementia and maybe wasn't aware where they were at the kind of end of their life, and they've got this horrible illness. Should we be putting them in intensive care? And we have to make those very difficult decisions. Now, important to say that going to intensive care or not going to intensive care doesn't mean that you're not going to get treatment. We still oxygen, the lines for antibiotics, all these things, we still do that. But is it kind to put tubes down people's airways? It's very difficult, though, to make all those kind of decisions, and it's made between the intensive care department, the A&E department. But these are really tough decisions to make, and even younger people in these situations that we had to make those difficult decisions with. And, I think that was very, very hard. I think we were at a point, particularly at the start of the pandemic and also at Christmas, where we were pretty much nearing being overwhelmed. I remember this Christmas, just after, I think it was January, I worked Christmas Day, and then it was a few days after that, I think it was just after New Year's in January, we had like no ventilators left in the hospital. We managed to get hold of some literally at the point where we're like, oh my God, we don't have any more. So thank God that no one went without. But it was really at that point where we're like, wow, we're like resource-wise running out here, because I don't know if you remember, they declared a major incident in London. And what that really means is that for healthcare professionals, for doctors, for heads of departments, for heads of hospitals, they are then in a position where they might have to make decisions about resources, i.e. do we give a ventilator to you or you? That is ultimately what we're saying, is that the pressure and the weight on the NHS is at the point where we might have to decide, you're having this ventilator, you're not. And very fortunately, certainly when I was in there, we didn't have that situation. I wasn't faced with that situation, but it was one that we were anticipating if things didn't get better. So it was pretty tough in that sense. The good side of being in A&E throughout the pandemic was that I wasn't on my own. I was living my own in London. I would have otherwise been at home the whole time. I felt a sense of purpose going there. I felt that I was able to do something in that time, and I was surrounded by my friends. So it's an odd catch-22 of like the worst, but also kind of helps.
Do you have a worst day throughout that period? A day where you think that was the hardest?
Worst day throughout the pandemic. I think there was a day where I was in resus that day, so we were kind of rotating different parts of the department. So I was in the resus department, and I was in there with a couple of the doctors and other nurses, and we were pretty much at capacity. So within our resus department, we have like 7 or 8 beds in that resus area. Bearing in mind these patients that require a huge amount of care. I mean, these are, trying to be near enough to one-to-one as we can to look after them, because they're very unwell, they're very sick. And we're at that day, we had 2 patients per bay. So we had to put 2 beds in each bay because we were absolutely at capacity. And in fact, we're at the point where we're having to put some almost in the corridor area of the resus. So it's within one big box room, but not in the bay. And that is very scary. And then we're also having that day, I remember we had ambulances lining up, so blue light ambulances, so they're the ones bringing the sickest patients outside, and you're looking at this situation going, we're at capacity. No, actually, we've gone over the capacity. We don't have any more capacity, so what do we do? And that is very frightening, not just in terms of space, but in terms of, right, I'm looking after this patient, this patient, this patient, this patient, this patient. They're all really sick. They all actually need my one-to-one time. How do I manage that situation? And that is very, very difficult. And a lot of people in the NHS has faced that across the country. In parts of, for example, St Thomas's, they had like 1 nurse for every 5 patients at some points during the pandemic in intensive care. It should be 1-to-1 intensive care.
How do you deal with the forming a connection with someone and then losing them in that hospital ward? And that must have happened time and time again throughout the pandemic.
Very tough. And I think one of the things that were hardest was, people couldn't believe it had happened to them. I've got to be careful, of course, of confidentiality, but I saw a gentleman who came in who was a professional, middle-aged man, was otherwise pretty well, had a family. A few days later, he was fine, and all of a sudden just deteriorated with his cough and breathlessness. By the time he came to us, his oxygen levels were incredibly low. He required a really high level of oxygenation. Even with the high level of oxygen we're given through a mask, it was clear that he actually needed to have a tube passed down to take over his breathing, because even with that high level of oxygenation and actually the pressurized mask we were using, we still weren't achieving adequate levels of blood saturations of oxygen. So it was not survivable to continue in that way. And we had to have a conversation with him, and I had to say to him, look, we are going to have to intubate you. We're going to have to put you in induced coma. We're going to have to put a tube down your throat. We're going to have to take over your breathing. You need to ring your family. We're going to get the iPad, because we had this, it's kind of sad. We had an iPad there for people to talk to their family before we did these things, because we knew that roughly if you get intubated, it's about 50-50-ish, something like that, of survival. It depends on the patient. There's a lot of different things, but the general rough kind of thing is that. And we said, look, you're going to have to potentially say goodbye, because we don't know what's going to happen. And he was very unwell, but he couldn't, he's still in his suit at the time when he came in, and he just couldn't believe it was happening. And it was that disbelief. He was like, am I really that sick? I was like, I explained everything as to why. And it was really, really hard watching someone going, how has this happened to me? And you have this moment of like, is this real? Is this some kind of, dream, nightmare, I guess? And we had to intubate him. He did survive, but he was very sick, and I think he survived by like a hair strands kind of width of from being from death. I would say he was very, very unwell, was in intensive care for a long period of time, but he did make it through. But he could easily have not, and I think witnessing those kind of events, and I've witnessed many other times with even younger people who didn't make it through. That is very tough. That's very difficult, because when I go home at the end of that shift, I'm like, well, will he make it? Will he not? It's very, very hard.
And then when you find out they haven't, I just, the constant bad news associated with that job.
Most of the time, A&E, the beauty of A&E is vast majority of the time we get it right. Vast majority of the time people survive, we make people better. And that's what we're very fortunate about. Actually, most of the time we spend our time making people better, and it works. But the pandemic's very hard, but even within that, of course, there's death. I mean, I don't know the actual exact figures, but every day or so, or every day someone will die in the A&E. Multiple times a day, people will die across the hospital. That is unfortunately the reality of the job that we do. So we do get used to that. But I think in the pandemic, it's the volume of that. The amount of death we saw was just exponential. So you balance in your head, because you think, well, 95% of the time, this is a good outcome. We do good and we help people and people get better. But in the pandemic, there was a swinging of that balance to being like, oh my gosh, I'm trying my best for all these patients, but a lot of people aren't making it. A very, very important thing to say here is obviously I am working in a position where I'm the resus department of a very busy hospital in A&E in London. We know that the mortality rate with COVID is around 1%. So don't want to sensationalize that element, but I am seeing that percentage of people who are the sickest who are in the hospital. So it's obviously important to say that. Sure. There are very many that 30% don't even have any symptoms, but I think it's very important for people to realize that there is very much two ends of that spectrum, and at the very sharp end, if you're a very sharp end of that spectrum, then it can be very serious.
So my last question on this COVID topic is, because of that perspective that you do have, and the spectrum, the side of the spectrum that you sit on, when you come online and you see people going, oh, COVID's not true. Conspiracy. Oh, vaccines don't work. COVID's not real. It's some government blah, blah, blah. It's the 5G masts, blah, blah, blah. What do you think?
Well, I mean, forget almost for a second the disrespect that it shows to all the doctors and nurses that have worked in that situation, had to deal with the things we've dealt with, and actually the professionals that have died of COVID. Don't forget, we have lost quite a lot of NHS staff. We nearly lost one of my good friends who was a nurse at Lewisham. She was in intensive care for 3 months. She nearly died of COVID, treating patients in resus. But also the disrespect to all the people that have lost their lives, from this, and the families that now have to live, have been one of the groups of people that have lost. It's very upsetting. I mean, people are going around. People going around to hospitals and going to waiting rooms of like Boots or outpatient reception, going, look, the hospital's empty. It's like, yeah, it's empty because we've closed all that, because all the doctors and nurses are pooled into the acute settings in the hospital to look after the rammed wards of patients that we need to care for. But the public see this picture of an empty reception room, think, oh, the hospitals aren't busy. So but I think the vast majority of people out there are good. Most people have been incredibly supportive, and the amount of support we've had for the NHS has been unbelievable. The fact that at the 73rd birthday, the NHS has awarded the George Cross I think it's for bravery, isn't it? But anyway, so it's the highest recognition, isn't it, that it can achieve, is a really good thing. And I hope that actually people have realised now how much we need the NHS, how lucky we are. I mean, you've been to America. The beauty is if you're here in this country, if you, God forbid, you're cycling home from work one day and you get in October, you get hit on the head, and you have a bleed in your brain, you will go to a hospital, you'll be operated on by a neurosurgeon who will look after you, you'll be in a hospital bed, you'll have all the rehabilitation that you need and support, even if it's for many months, and you will, at the point of that service, at the point of care, you won't pay a penny. And that is incredible. If you compare that to the God knows how many hundreds of thousands of millions that would cost in other countries, we're very lucky.
Oh my God. Anyone that's against the NHS only needs to go spend a week in New York and just go, speak to people about their relationship with their health.
Yeah.
For us, we don't think about it in the same way. People in the US have to choose their job based on health options, and they have to, and when they lose their job, they're losing their healthcare.
Yeah.
And it's just, and we don't even consider it.
No.
And I tell you what, from living in New York for 3 years, I'd much rather have it this way. I fit, and it's given me this huge sense of gratitude for the NHS, because we just totally take it for granted, especially people that haven't experienced the alternative.
I mean, I a few years ago, I got sepsis. I was actually working in A&E and that day in a shift in Lewisham, and I started having fever in the afternoon, and by late afternoon, I didn't feel well. I actually cycled home about 6 miles from work, really struggling. I was really fit at the time. I was struggling to get home. Got home, I was like, pulse, I'm having a fever. Oh gosh, I'm actually quite sick. I was like, a bit of a realisation. Got on the tube to go to St Thomas's at Westminster, pretty much collapsed in the door of St Thomas's, ended up in resus and had the most incredible care. Was in hospital for a week with sepsis. But they saved my lives. And I was like, wow. And I saw, it was really interesting because I saw the NHS from not as a worker, but as a patient. And I was like, God, we are so lucky. I literally had everyone looking after me, the care I had. And let's be frank, I wouldn't be here if it wasn't for the treatment I had. And at the end of the week or whatever, thankfully I had a quick recovery. I just walked out of the hospital and I was like, that's it. I've had this amazing care. I don't have to pay anything. And I'm still here to tell the tale, So I really hope that people will support the NHS more than ever now, coming out of it, and protect it and make sure we don't strip it of any more of its money.
I want to talk about 2019, which was the year 2020. Yeah, the year you lost your brother. I saw your interview with Lad Bible, and I saw the I can't quite shake that image of you sat at dinner. You said about your dad's phone call. Can you take me back to that moment?
Yeah, I mean, it's almost a year to the day now. I think the 23rd of July will be the anniversary of his death, but the year's gone very quickly. It's very odd. It feels like yesterday, but yeah, very odd with the time. But I was sat at dinner in London with some friends. We actually just ordered a few drinks. About to order kind of starters, mains. I was busy looking at my menu, thinking what we're going to eat and whatever. I think, it's a great place. This is, enjoy myself. And the phone went. And I'm thinking my dad would say, look, because I do a lot of stuff with filming or whatever, if you ring once, if you just want to chat, ring once, and I know you're ringing for chat, and I'll call you back. But if you ring twice or more, I know it's something important, and I'll always answer, doesn't matter what situation I'm in. So he rung twice. In fact, I think it was going to the third call. All right, okay, I need to answer this. And I could hear in his voice instantly that something really bad had happened. It's weird when you hear that rattle or that kind of tone in someone's voice. There's only one thing that has happened, and I just said straight away, like, who's died, like who's passed away, like what's happened. And he said, Llyr has passed away, Llyr is dead. And I was like, what? And it was weird. The whole world like closed in, and I can't explain it. It sounds really dramatic, but it was like almost a spotlight came onto me in that moment, and I was like, no, it can't be. I just couldn't believe it. And the disbelief, and he said, yeah, he's passed away. And then we had to drive back. My middle brother Elliot, who's in the RAF, he drove up to London. He works out just outside in one of the bases, and he came in to fetch me, and we drove back together. And it was kind of 5-hour drive back to West Wales, and it felt like 10 eternities. Like every mile was like the longest mile, and I went into every like corner of my mind, but you just couldn't fathom it really, And I think that's the thing about suicide, or about when these things happen. It can happen out of nowhere, and you just haven't seen it, and you've been hit by this train. And it was kind of a weird, like we were talking earlier on about Freya and having the opportunity to say goodbye. like having that closure. I didn't get that with him. You know, he was supposed to come to London the week after, and then we were going to go back to Wales together, and it's the first time I'd have seen him in a long time because of the pandemic. And all of a sudden I was like, wow, I don't get any closure. That's it then. You know, and I think that has been very, and continues to be very difficult. The lack of, you know, why didn't he talk to me about it? You know, as someone who knew the work I was doing around mental health, particularly during the pandemic, you know, why didn't you ask me for help? You know, it's very, very hard.
I saw you said that one of your biggest sort of regrets as a family was not seeing the signs. And in hindsight, you can start to think, well, you know.
Yeah, it's one of those things, isn't it? I mean, it's you know, he was very worried about his exam results coming up, you know, understandly so. He had a place at med school that he was very excited. He saw what happened to me. He's very excited about that. He's future planning about it and really looking forward. And, you know, I think probably in the weeks before, he probably was a bit more anxious about the pandemic, and I thought, well, you know, he's been locked up quite a bit with all the restrictions, but we're going to see him next week. But nothing out of what I would say is what you'd expect as a, you know, 19-year-old kid that's been kind of stuck in the whole time. But now it's easy. It is easy when you look back and you think in hindsight, oh, that was a sign of that, and that. But you're going to have that regret, aren't you? You know, you're always going to. It's human nature. My mum is always has that sense of guilt around it. You know, she can't control what happened. It's his action. It's his choice that he made, but for everyone around that person, it is that guilt that you carry, I think, forever.
And there was no lasting indication of how he was feeling. He hadn't said anything to anybody.
No, I mean, he was really fed up with being kind of the pandemic again, and he was like worried about his exam results. We talked about that a lot, and I'd asked him about how he was feeling. I was like, yeah, but once I got through this bit, you know, I'm kind of all right, kind of thing. And nothing that would make you think that, you know, and go down to that route. But it's one of those things that people often, when people go to, you know, take their own life, or, you know, not all the time, but quite often, people will sometimes, well, at least in his case, you know, they don't give the warning signs because they've made their decision of what they wanted to do. And the shame is, I think, the biggest shame, I think, is that he just obviously couldn't feel the sense within him that he could ask and say, this is how I feel, can I have help? And when I talk about a lot of the work I want to do around stigma, and people go, oh yeah, we're talking about loads of stigma's done. So no, because, you know, he felt to the point where he'd rather take a decision that had a binary decision, if you like, with his life. He felt so much like this with it that he couldn't talk about it, that he took that decision. So I think there's so much cultural stuff, there's so much stuff around stigma that is still got to do to change that. Because, you know, if you'd have said something, if you'd talked about it, we could have, you know, I big believe that we can get through anything, we can change, we can work through most things, but you've got to have the opportunity for help. And I think that's where there's an interesting conversation around, yes, mental health services clearly need more funding. There's no counter argument against that, and we need to do more. But we actually have to work on the education around mental health and the stigma element too, because in his scenario, even if you had the best mental health system in this country ever, if you didn't ask for help, how is he going to access that service? And I think we lose too many, particularly young men each year, who are not actually accessing any help or reaching out at all before they take that decision. We're losing the chance to save those people, you know. And I think there's that balance. You know, we need to work on the stigma, we need to work on the funding, in combination to kind of change this. But, you know, for him, it's too late, you know. But I hope that through my work I'm doing now, I can't take the pain or whatever way of what's happened, but I can hopefully prevent other families going through it, because it's an awful burden to carry, you know, and I've got to carry it for whatever, you know, hopefully a long time, but, you know, whatever length of my life is, I have to carry that, you know, that doesn't go away. It's always there.
This is a tough question, but you just said that you have to carry that burden, and people often think that, especially people that are naive to grief. Yeah. They think that it's, you go through the process like a breakup, and then your business as usual. But you've got to carry that grief for a long time.
Yeah.
Is there a mixture of emotions in terms of feelings towards the decision he made that you also contend with?
Yeah, I think you go through every emotion of like anger, upset, frustration, sadness, feeling of guilt, every spectrum of negative emotion, I think, and you cycle through that. And I think the process I've had with grief is kind of going through the kind of shock phase, you know, anger, shock, upset, you know, the kind of sadness through it, and trying to come to a place of acceptance, I guess, is where you've got to try and get to. And I don't know, I'm guess somewhere on the way to that, but you kind of go backwards and forth that sometimes, you know, I think your grief is not a linear process. I think it's very much that zigzag of kind of You get better, get worse, get a bit better, get a bit worse. And, you know, you carry what I think is like a black box in your head with it. You know, when it first happens, you're just staring into this abyss of this black box of sadness and everything. And then eventually you learn to close the box. Eventually it shrinks a little bit. And hopefully eventually you can put it on your shelf, and you can sometimes go and sit and ruminate with it, but then you can put it back when you need to. And I think that is what happens. And I think that's why you will always carry it. You can't get rid of it. You know, you never stop loving that person. You know, you just have to learn to live with that black box in your head, basically.
And I imagine that's quite, I mean, I've got two brothers, so I imagine that's quite an informative life, tragic informative life incident that then changes the way you view your own life and choices and decisions. And
I think it puts into perspective puts things in perspective. But interestingly not as well, I still get annoyed and upset about the same things I got annoyed about before. But then I have to go, Alex, like, in reality, some things you've had to kind of deal with is probably fine. And I think it's funny in that way. But it does mean that, you know, I try. It's kind of given me another purpose that, you know, in life, I guess, that I want to kind of work on. And I think it does make me think much more about, like, I want to make sure that in life I can impact positively on people, and if I can influence people in a positive sense in this space, then I think that would be success to me. I think that if it was to ask, like, what is the definition of success to me, I think it probably would be feeling that I've made a genuine impact in that mental health space, and that other people won't take their life, or will seek help and get help before they're at that point, or when they're at that point. I think that would be success for me. And yeah, I think that has changed a lot of that kind of mindset in my head. But I also want to live life a lot more. I've also, like, because it's happened, I'm like, I want to go on holiday. I want to enjoy. I love cars. I'm going to Formula 1 this weekend. I want to go and enjoy my hobbies. It's made me want to, like, live as an enriched life as I can.
You said that your life will always kind of be defined as before and after that incident. And when I was reading about the interviews that you've done and the podcast you've done following losing your brother, they always gravitate back to this conversation, right? It's almost and it's become part of one of the things people like me want to talk to you about and ask you about. So I was sat there wondering, how does that feel when you know that if you go and do an interview, go and do a podcast, that at some point it's going to come back to that tragic topic of losing your brother? Well,
so I think it's true. It's that before and after element, isn't it? I don't think I am entirely the same person as I was before. I think, in fact, and it makes a lot of sense, if you're going to experience a massive life-changing event, it's probably going to change you. If it's changed your life, it's going to change you. I'm still at the core the same person I always was, but I think I've probably been slightly molded a bit differently, and I think I don't think I'm entirely the same, and I don't really know what I mean by that, and I can't really give an answer to in what way am I different, but I'm just not quite the same person, I think, and potentially it's because I have to carry this box, you know. But yeah, in terms of kind of interviews and things afterwards and talking about it, as odd as this might sound, in many ways it's therapy. I know that might be maybe not the answer you probably expected, but in a way it's a way of me talking with different people about an experience that has shaped my life, and hearing their thoughts on that as well. And I've taken a lot from speaking to people about it, and I think talking is good. And I think bottling these things up and hiding away wouldn't help. And it's interesting because when he passed away, we took the decision to go public and tell people, because he passed away. I didn't want there to be any confusion. Has he died of COVID? What's happened? How has he passed away? I wanted people to understand. No, he died of suicide. He had he died of a mental health illness. That was very important for us to make that kind of statement. But I knew in that point that the people then would, that we would end up talking about this. But the way I kind of see it is that even on days it's difficult to talk about, if it helps someone else, if someone else is listening or watching this podcast and they go, I'm going to watch out for the signs in other people, or I'm going to be much more aware of this now, or if I'm struggling, I'm going to give it this chance. I'm going to speak to someone. I'm going to go to a professional. I'm going to speak to my family, talk to my friends. Then that to me is worth doing that interview.
The other consequence of speaking about it so often, and being known as someone that has, part of your story tragically is that your brother took his own life, is you will get, and I know I have a fraction of this, but you will get thousands of DMs of people who are feeling suicidal, who are, in a very, very, very dark place. In fact, I imagine if you opened up your phone now and went on your DMs, it wouldn't take long for us to find a couple of those just at the top of your inbox, right? That is, I mean, that must feel like...
It's heavy. It's heavy. And I think this role has been... I mean, I really enjoy what I do in the youth mental health work. And I think a lot of the work we do is very, very positive, very uplifting, actually. And I think the work, particularly on wellbeing, is really, really positive. And I want the conversation around mental health to be one about how exciting it is as a space by empowering yourself, giving yourself the tools to live a happy and successful life in whatever definition that is. But of course, there is the other side of it, of having that weight of those who are struggling. And, you know, what I try and do is work across, you know, basically in areas and campaigns that can help the majority in these things. You know, I realize that sadly, I can't sit and help and fix everyone's that's DMing me. If I tried, I would fail. I'd probably cripple and cry if I tried to do it, you know. So I try and look at doing the big projects and help people in that way, if that makes sense. But, you know, of course, when I speak to a lot of people, because I go out and speak to young people, I speak to people who are struggling in person, and it is heavy sometimes. But again, I go back to, if I feel like I've managed to help them, and then that really helps. And of course, a lot of the content that I make is around, you know, speaking about well-being, about mental health. I feel that I'm able to influence people in a positive way. But of course, it is heavy. It is hard. It's not an easy thing. And I'm sure, and it's the same, anyone, you know, you talk about a lot of emotive subjects as well, particularly around the space, actually, in your podcast, and have done for a long time. So you, of course, get those messages. And it's difficult, isn't it? Because you can't help everyone, is the truth. Yeah, you can't. Yeah. When I say you can't help everyone, you can't individually help everyone.
And you also know logically that the best return on your time would be, in that case, making, just in the case of Instagram, I know that the best return on my time, if I want to help people, would be to take that 1 hour that I could have spent going back and forward with someone in my DMs and make it into something that could reach 1 million people by making a video, for example. Yeah,
well, it's the same idea of like A&E. You know, in A&E, and a shift in A&E, and I do it because I really, really love it, selfishly maybe. But if I do a shift in A&E, I can help 11 or 12 people, which is really, and I'm not taking away from that at all, because the change you make in that person's life, literally saving people's lives. Okay, so I don't see it as it's like, oh, I can help more is better. But if I'm using my platform in the mental health space, particularly in what I'm trying to achieve, I can reach so many more people. You know, because in A&E we're fixing people with problems that we can fix in that moment. That's the idea of A&E. You know, the work I'm doing is really preventative. So that's what I've realized. That's why I stepped away more since post-pandemic from the A&E work, because I've realized that is fixing the problems when they've happened. I want to work on that preventative side and reach as many people as possible. So that's why that kind of that value of time.
Of course, makes perfect sense. I actually watched your video on this last night where you were announcing that you were making the shift, and I'm sat there thinking, like, this is what I was thinking. I was thinking, obviously, I was like, there's not a lot of people that have the ability to reach millions a day with a preventative message. So I feel like, and this is not me trying to tell you how to live your life, but I was like, that's obviously the best return on your time is to work on the preventative end, which you've talked about today. Do you think you've got balance in your life?
I think I'm finding it. So probably no is a binary answer. I think we're all trying to do that. And
how is your life out of balance?
I think at the moment, particularly coming out of the pandemic, I'm still trying to figure out the workspace stuff. Like, as before, I worked in A&E kind of 2 days a week, then I'd work from home and doing stuff. But now I'm moved kind of out of the A&E sphere as much, even though I'm going back to do some shifts. I'm not going to be in as much as I was. I'm just trying to find that balance of switching off and switching on. So the working day, you know, especially because so much of my work is across Instagram and stuff, I'm finding that challenge. And people go, well, hang on, this is what you talk about a lot in your book and stuff. It's like, yeah, but being aware of the problem doesn't mean you always got it fixed all the time. It doesn't mean you got it down all the time. Most of the time, I'm getting there, and I'm pretty good at it. Things like getting out on the walk in the morning, getting my exercise in, my sleep stuff, I'm doing all right. But the thing of switching off the phone, and my Instagram particularly, that is the bit I'm still not quite finding the balance on. And as I say, finding that balance between being at work and not being at work. But the truth is, that's okay, because most of us in life, no one has got life down. I don't think there's anyone I've ever met, they've entirely got their life down. They might have their career down, they might have problems in their family, or they're falling out with their girlfriend or whatever. No one's got it down.
That sounded like me.
Sorry. No, but I mean, everyone has a time where, like, at any time something's going too well, you know, something's going to happen. So I think it's just being honest with yourself and going like, right, at the moment, that's what I'm trying to do. So I'm actually looking for an office space now at the moment. So I'm going to define my space that I work in, so it's realizing the things the challenges you have, and actually, like we said earlier, what are the steps you're taking to fix those challenges, to find that balance? One of the things that I've done, which has worked really well, is that on the weekends, by and large, and I stick this very strictly, weekends are mine again now. I worked for almost a whole year throughout the whole pandemic, across being on TV, Public Health England stuff, being on Instagram, YouTube, all this stuff. And I was working almost every day and ridiculous hours between full-time and A&E and everything else. It was crazy hours, right? And it was only going to lead to me being burnt out, and I think, and that's fine for a short period of time. It's not fine for the long term. So now I've fought back and dragged back my weekends, mostly got my weekends back to actually do stuff with my family and my friends, go to the Formula 1, go to Goodwood, or go and watch tennis and stuff. Very fortunate to be able to do these things. But when I'm old and I look back on my life, I want to remember and look back and go, actually, I did make the most of life. I didn't just work all the time. It is work-life balance, is those cliched old thing, but it is important to have.
You mentioned something there about you doing an indirect at me about my poor relationship with my family and my girlfriend.
It wasn't indirect at you. It just happened to be an example.
So I want to throw that back at you. So in terms of your dating situation, your relationship situation, you posted a photo not so long ago of your girlfriend.
Mm-hmm. Ellie.
Okay, you're happy. I don't want to say her name, but we'll go there. New girlfriend, new relationship?
Yeah. I mean, I look at the pandemic scenario. I mean, I was working in the hospital, and the work I was doing was going well, and all that kind of stuff. Pre-Llyr losing his life, I suppose, that part of it. But my relationship suffered because I worked so hard in that sphere. My girlfriend at the time moved back to Bournemouth where her family was, so I was working ridiculous hours, not seeing her at all because of the pandemic restrictions, being separated, and my relationship suffered. So I've been in that situation, and it ended for that reason. We've been in that relationship for like 2 or more years, and I think it was quite a serious relationship at the time. And then, the pandemic and my focus on the work probably resulted in the end of that relationship. So that was a big thing. I think part of coming back to that work-life balance and now going into this new relationship, I think I'm trying to make sure that I'm investing in those aspects of my life as well. The family, the friends, the relationships. It's not all about the work or, the campaigns or the things I'm doing. You've got to, again, it's finding that balance. But I learned from that, and I don't regret it. My role in that pandemic was to be there.
Your current relationship.
No. I don't regret choosing to be in A&E and to do what I did in that pandemic, because that was my purpose at that moment. That was the right thing for me to do. And sadly, sometimes following your purpose has outcomes and things that it affects. And that's the way I see it.
In chapter 6 of your book, when you're talking about relationships, you talk a lot about how we meet each other in this day and age, and you talk about some of the dating apps, etc. How did you meet her?
We actually met in person.
Really?
In the kind of traditional way, like when there was the kind of break in the pandemic, you could meet people, and just at a pub, actually, just really? Natural, normal meeting place. But obviously that's changed so much now. I mean, I'm not on the dating apps for the reasons that, I think for obvious reasons. But that has become so much.
Too many inquiries.
I
love how you have to brush over that.
That is the thing, isn't it? That is where people are meeting each other now, and I think that's why in the book I didn't brush over that topic, because we have to accept that people are meeting each other through all these various apps, whatever it might be, and the technology and things now. But it's about not forgetting that at the heart of that connection, that in-person and physical connection that you build with someone needs to be there as well. It can't just all be online. It's like an entry point to meeting people, isn't it? But I think it's an interesting one. Things have changed so much. I mean, are you on the dating apps?
I'm not on the dating apps.
Currently?
No, I couldn't do that.
No,
unfortunately.
No.
Not that I'd want to, but I couldn't.
No, but it's changed so much for people. I think the world of dating. And I think that one of the things I do worry about, I don't know what you think about this, but I think the world has become so, what's the word, like throwaway. Things are like, you can date someone, see them on a date, bump, gone, next time. And that I worry about a little bit about that, about
shallow
people.
Connection.
Yeah. Not real, like even amongst friendships and stuff, people are just like right in and out. It's like a swipe left, swipe right kind of idea. And I worry about that a little bit.
Why are you hard to date?
I think that over the years that I've been so focused, I think, on my work and the things that I want to do, very driven in that space. I mean, yeah, like there's always an element of selfishness, isn't there? When you focus on something to the extent that you have, and I have, certainly, particularly, for example, in the pandemic, it becomes almost selfish, because even if you're doing it for an altruistic means, it's becoming something you are doing so intensively that other people are being maybe not having the focus that they're expecting, or you're not giving attention to other areas. So it's become selfish, doesn't it? And I think that makes it challenging. But I'm getting much better at that. And I hope Ellie would say that as well.
Well, we spoke to her and she said...
She actually said...
Ellie, come on out.
He's on his phone all the time.
Yeah. What relationship advice would you give me if you've learned something? I'm single at the moment, trying to fix that situation. But what advice would you give me that you've learned as being a very purpose-driven, busy guy? What's the one thing you think, that's the most important?
I think the first thing is don't try and fix it.
Really?
I think it's that acceptance. I think I'm a big believer. I don't believe that happiness is like altered whether you're in a relationship or not. Your state of happiness is it's an internal thing. Relationships, other people are external. They do add to that, of course. I'm not clearly. It'd be worrying if I didn't think Ellie didn't make my life happy. But she can add to something that's existing. Mm-hmm. If it's not there in the first place, there's nothing to add to. So I always think it's focusing on yourself and your passions and interests, and try and meet someone that will genuinely, it's so cliche, but I think it is really, really true, that genuinely adds to you as a person. If you're rubbing up against someone, your purposes aren't aligned in some way, there isn't some kind of crossover in your directions in life, I don't know if that's going to work. So you kind of need someone else that's got millions and millions of them and has the same desire to build a massive empire of podcasting, whatever. No, I'm joking, but it's that sharing common ground, isn't it? It's finding something that adds to you in some way. But I mean, even with Ellie now, for example, she recognises in me when I'm starting to get stressed and working, like particularly mental health work does cause me a lot of stress sometimes, ironically. And she recognises that, and she's really great at helping me step away and saying, do you know what, you've done a lot in that space. Let's step away for a moment and take a bit of time. You don't need, when do you stop? That quite line, and learning to stop. And she adds in that way a huge amount, a sense of calm to my life, actually, which is really great. So I do feel that if you're with someone, whether even it's a friendship, your friend should surely add to your life in some way. If they're not adding to your life, are they truly your friend? Very deep thoughts.
No, but it's so important.
What are your thoughts about it? I mean, what are you looking for in your next girlfriend? This is turning.
No, it's a good question. So, what am I looking for in my next girlfriend? I've actually always been pretty clear.
Or your final girlfriend,
yeah, because I do this podcast a lot. So I always ask these questions, and I ask them to a range of guests. And 10 years ago, I would have told you about hair colours and nonsense like that, right? Yeah. And I've got more fundamental over the last decade, and I'm at the point now where really three things, which is I want them to help me become a better version of myself, purposefully ambiguous. So that could be a more kind person. It could be more spiritually in touch. It could be more successful in my business, but help me become a better person, and vice versa. The second thing is sexual attraction, which you write about, and you write about the importance of having those conversations and being open about that in your book. It's just important. I've had everything else and not that, and it doesn't work, right? No. So, and the last one was, I would refer to it as like mental stimulation, which is just being able to connect intellectually around topics. And I think if I can, those are the three things. Everything else is kind of, blah, blah, blah. And I know there's going to be loads of bullshit. You can't, as we talked about earlier, all things come with a cost. Yeah. So it's really, and that's another point, is this really important question, which I've come to ask myself, which used to be, are they perfect? Right? And over my...
Alas, you'd be looking for the whole of your lifetime.
The unicorn, I'm fucking But now it's reframed, and it's now, is it worth it?
Yeah. I know exactly what you're saying.
Do you know what I mean?
First of all, I agree with all your 3 points entirely, and all of them are required, I think, to be in there for it to kind of work. But yeah, I mean, no one's perfect. We're all in the beauty of the world is everyone's imperfect. We'll all have things that people would say, Alex, that's a really annoying trait of yours. We're going to have that, right? It's finding is the good worth the things that you maybe don't think are as perfect about that person. And when you found that in someone, you've really won, being like, do you know what? I accept their imperfections. They accept my imperfections, but the good and the combined good parts of each of us makes it worthwhile. And I think that is the ultimate goal, isn't it, really?
Yeah. Just to find someone that's worth the bullshit. And I mean, we all have bullshit. And this is it's a really introspective thing where I realized that I am so imperfect. So the pursuit of finding someone that is perfect is such a nonsense thing to do when I'm so clearly imperfect by whatever definition you want to use.
We're all like jigsaw shapes, aren't we, really, in our lives, and you kind of got to be able to fit. And it's also the practicality of life. You need to have like careers, and it's so difficult in modern life. Like people have opposing careers that don't work together. It's like there's so many bits of that jigsaw. But I think again, it comes to even stuff about careers. If the other bits and the sum of the rest it equates to that being worth it, then you find a way to make it work. You find a way to, make that relationship grow and work. But you just got to find that right. It's finding that right person, I think. And I think if you go into it with that mindset, with those three kind of key ideals and things that you're looking for, then hopefully you won't go too far wrong.
Well, I have to ask you one last question, which is, this is a business podcast at the end of the day, or at least I say it is. Or at least that's the category I put it in. And you've started a business, Prescribed, which is in the wellbeing wellness space. Why? You were already busy. What are you doing? And tell me how hard it is.
Well, funny if it started from a place of I love bath bombs because so I have to stop myself from doing things. I need to put myself in a place where I sit down, I relax and unwind. Getting in the bath. Put your phone away from the bath. You can't do very much really. You're sat in the bath, right? Put some music on, listen to your podcast. Well, occasionally I have in the bath. That's not an image you probably want to think. But anyway, I sit in the bath, listen to the podcast, right? So it helps me chill out. I chuck a bath bomb in or whatever. And I was showing on my stories. I always show it chucking in the bath bomb and on my stories, and I chuck the phone away to get in the bath. And people start saying, why didn't you do it yourself? Lush is great, but there's no one in that space. Why didn't you create it? And I thought, I actually do a lot of stuff in my life that's very heavy, that's very stressful. This would be a really exciting business to do. So I kind of started looking into it, and a few months later, we're doing a range of bath bombs, which I'm very proud of. The vegan bath bombs. We're trying to, I say environment in mind, because I think sustainability is a word that's very tricky to say that you're truly sustainable. Environment in mind, and we're growing our product range. The idea of Prescribed is that you're prescribing yourself time, investing in yourself, in self-care. And I think that's what I was doing getting into the bath, and that's what I want the brand to be. So it's going to be candles, shower products, creams and moisturizers, everything around that self-care space. But it's great. It's booming quick because I think people are so interested in this space. It's a £3 billion pound space in the market at the moment, isn't it? It's a huge industry that's growing, and people want to genuinely take care of themselves. And it's just, it's very exciting.
This is your first business?
It's my first business. Yeah.
Are you CEO?
I'm CEO.
How are you finding that?
It's outside the comfort zone. I mean, we talk about it's well outside the comfort zone, but I really enjoy it. I really enjoy it. I've got a great team around me. We've got a small team. It's not compared to your businesses. But we've got to start somewhere. I've got a small team around me, and what I think is very important, and I say this. I've got no right to say this in the business space, but I've learned it in life to be true. Recognize the areas that you are weaker at. Recognize what you don't know about, and bring people in to sort that. So I got someone, a fantastic person called Llyr, who is amazing at product design, finding products within the beauty space. She's done an amazing job. We're working with an amazing factory that we're working on the bath bombs. We've got people that understand marketing properly. We've got people that understand the business side of it and how much things cost, how much does that, what do we price it at? So I've just realized, but what I'm not good at, and get people in to come and help me. The bit I do understand the social media side. So I kind of lead quite a lot on that because I kind of get it. It's just kind of incorporating into my life. But yeah, it's pretty scary. I mean, especially running into Christmas. We're planning the Christmas. It's a very important thing. We're thinking about doing pop-up. We're going to do a pop-up shop and stuff like that. I mean, it's all a bit scary, and you have to invest in your own business clearly, but it's exciting, right? I obviously keep listening to your podcast, but I need you to give me some expert. Now I'm doing Dragon's Den, I need some expert advice to help me make it into a massive business.
It's fascinating, and it's amazing that after 5 months you figured out already one of the most important lessons about business, which the best entrepreneurs in this country have also figured out. If you look at Ben Francis, Julian Hearn, who's the founder of Huel, all of those individuals realized that they weren't either. It's one of two things: either competent to be the CEO, or they didn't want to be. And you have to want to do it, and you have to also think you're capable at doing it. Now, it's the same for me in my business. Like, there were so many things that I either didn't want to do or didn't feel competent enough in doing. Yeah. And had I not had that self-awareness and had I let my ego say, no, you have to be the CEO and you have to be involved in everything, there's 0% chance I would have succeeded. And I'm seeing this tremendous, really positive shift amongst founders who are getting out the way of their own sort of inexperience, especially young ones, because when you're young, again, ego comes in. And the other thing that happens, which I talk about in this podcast, and the other critical mistake you make is when you're a new entrepreneur or inexperienced, you don't think you have the right to hire super mega experienced people, because you think, why would they want to come and work here in our little, social media company or our bath bomb company in this cupboard that we're working out of? Why would they want to be here? So you make the critical mistake of hiring your mate Dave.
Who,
no,
I don't have any Daves in the team.
Well, I made that mistake, and you do it because of, and that again is a critical, fatal mistake. And those are probably the two most important things. Business is all about, by definition, the word company means a group of people. That is literally what ends up mattering the most. The group of people. That is, and it took me probably 3 to 4 years to figure that out in my journey.
So it's the most important thing for me now to make sure I got the right team. Is what you're saying.
100%.
Moving forward.
It's what you are. You aren't so think about what you've created. You've created this idea, this bath bomb vegan idea. Where did that come from? The genius in it, where did it come from? It came from a person. The way your business is run in terms of its finance, the strategy, the marketing, the investment you raise, all of these things, the decisions, they're all going to come from the people. A business and the product is all a manifestation of people. Apple's a great example of that. Huel's a great example of that. And if you have, and I view it as a starting 11, if you're starting 11, and your starting 11 is going to war with Lush, right? If your starting 11 does not match up, you will fail. And so it took me 3 years to get to the point where I realized that I am just a recruitment business.
Okay. I see.
Do you see what I mean?
I think you're probably underpaying.
I will win based on my recruitment. We are a recruitment company. And I remember the day I stood in front of Social Chain and said that, like, if we know the people are the most important thing, why don't we have an internal recruitment team?
It's a really interesting, because I realised that having the right people is important, but I quite haven't viewed it in that way.
Everything comes from that. Everything comes from that.
It's a very good point.
As the company gets bigger, your role as a founder is somewhat diminished.
That scares me a little, because we are very, we're still small, but I'd say we're doing very well. We're growing very quickly. We're expanding quickly our ranges, etc. That scares me, that growth, quite a bit. Because then that's, again, being uncomfortable zone. It's like, well, how do we manage who needs to come in and do this? And it's a bit scary.
So you just have to go find really good people. And one point in my business, maybe year 3 or 4, we hired a lady called Katie Leeson from MediaCom, who'd been doing this for 10 years, whatever. She went back to MediaCom and hired all of her friends from MediaCom, who were also like double my age in some cases, whatever, almost double my age. And they ran the business. And I had no problems. They were so experienced and had done this before.
So you're saying is don't let your ego get in the way. Let people come in and do their thing.
I flew off to New York. I had no problems. They solved all the problems in my business that I didn't even know were problems. And I can say, well, what if I hadn't made that decision? Well, before then I hadn't made the decision, and my life was hell. Every day was hell. Like hell. I'd wake up in the morning, hell. And the thing that cured it was installing a group of people who had done this before and were really, really good. That, to be fair, when they accepted the job, I thought, why do they want to work here? And those people, and they've
loved it, and they've grown.
They've done it. They've grown as well, and the business is.
It's really interesting to hear you say it, because I think we talk about work-life balance, right? I'm looking for an office space. The other thing I've realised is that I need to grow my own team. So I'm actually now growing, not just prescribed as one of the elements. I'm growing my own team that's the kind of Dr. Alex brand team. And I think a big part of, I've come to that point of realising I need to let go of certain aspects. People can take over that. They can do this part of it. They can add and allow me to basically free up my time to do the front-facing stuff, which we talked about, I think, before. So it is interesting. I think I'm learning that. It's taking me time. I think one of the things, funny enough, that I think has helped, and obviously I know they're going to make mistakes in this business. I think I've heard, listened enough to your podcast say that people make mistakes. But one of the things that's helped is that working as a doctor, you know and accept that you are not a specialist in every area of it. Medicine's huge. So we have dermatologists, cardiologists, neurosurgeons, surgeons, obstetricians. So I'm kind of quite happy for people to go like, your specialty is that, you do that, you do that. I'm kind of happy with that idea.
That's where you've got it from.
But the thing that I do fear a little bit, I I worry about letting things go a little bit. It's not really I just worry about not having sight over things. So I think that's what we're kind of building the brand of Dr. Alice and having people help me allow us to do more. I'm just scared a little bit of letting go of stuff.
And it becomes a lot easier when you pass the buck to trusted hands. You'll always have the fear if you're passing any part of the responsibility of your business to a hand that you don't fully trust. What you want to do, and this is exactly what happened in my business, is I passed it to hands that were better than me. So I was like, oh, fuck it. And I always think this. I said this to my PA a few times, like in the company, in like, say, the video department or the studio, whatever, the guy is better than me that runs the studio. So I never speak to him. And then Steve Jobs said the same. He said, your job as a CEO is to hire great people and they tell you what to do. And if you've still got trust problems in your business and you still aren't, you're concerned about giving up responsibilities, then it's because you don't have the right people. Yeah. And so again, it comes back to that point of that being, it turns out that that's everything. And I didn't know it.
That's really useful advice.
Well, I'm glad
not just to chat to you, I'm glad I'm going to take all that away.
Well,
that's very
genuinely,
useful to know, honestly.
It took me years and I had to witness the pain of the opposite to realize. And I just pray you don't. And I need to surround myself with the right people and trust them. People way beyond the people you think you deserve in your business at this time. And that's what moves it forward. People that you think, why would they go get the global head of marketing of Lush? Yeah. And your job as CEO is to sell them on the reason why it's better to be in this small, exciting, agile startup than that big, boring conglomerate where you're a cog on a wheel. Yeah. That's the pitch, right?
I'm going to write that down.
Yeah.
Saving the pitch.
Well, you've got to record it anyway. But listen, Alex, you've given me tons of your time and reading about yourself, your journey. I don't watch Love Island, I've got to be honest, but so there's always that stigma when you think about, Love Island. It comes with a bit of a tainted brush. But as I delved further into your journey, I was just so inspired by everything, by how intelligent you are, by your radical empathy for people, which is quite rare these days, by your being so obsessively purpose driven, which again is super rare, especially for someone that's been on Love Island. You don't have to say anything. I'm the one stereotyping. And it's just so incredibly inspiring. And this book that you've written, Live Well Every Day, it's perfect because it's so inclusive and it's so actionable and and that key word there is inclusive. When I read it, I felt like this isn't going to create a barrier to entry for anybody. And you're a doctor, so you could have easily just equated and done like word porn, but you made it really accessible and actionable and broken down into key categories, and you're conveying a critically important message to a society that needs to hear it right now. So thank you for all of your work in the NHS. Very selfless, and I mean that in and of itself is tremendously commendable. And thank you for all of the inspiration, because you've certainly inspired me.
Well, thank you so much for having me. It's an honour to be on this podcast, and I've learned a lot as well. So thank you.
Oh, amazing, Alex. Thank you so much. Thanks.